Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Young, charming, beautiful bride in a snow-white lush dress with a corset nervously drank water and blotted her face with a towel in the kitchen of the rented flat. Every minute she dialed the number of her fiancé or future matchmakers, but all in vain. All she could hear was, "The subscriber is out of range." Caroline threw the phone in her heart and, wringing her hands, exclaimed, "What the hell? It's 2:10 and Jason and I have an hour wedding. We're already late for it. Where the hell did they all go? My mom's probably waiting at the registry office. She's going to call. What am I going to say? That the groom hasn't come for me yet? And the restaurant's booked for 4. The guest, Cynthia. Tell me, he didn't leave me, did he? He couldn't have done that, could he? I don't believe it." Her friend and colleague realized that it was probably true, but she didn't want to upset her friend and tried to cheer her up somehow. "So, Caroline, do not cry. I've been doing your makeup for an hour, and you've made me damp. Why are you getting yourself worked up? What if there's a traffic jam or an accident? Things happen. Wait. Your Romeo will come. Where will he go?" But another half an hour passed, and the wedding cortege still hadn't arrived for the bride. Not only that, but her mother-in-law finally picked up the phone and finished Caroline off. "Stop ringing. There's not going to be a wedding. I've canceled everything. Jason changed his mind. He doesn't love you. And don't get on our nerves. Leave him alone. He's a tick." Caroline sobbed inconsolably. Her mom had come too, having failed to wait for her daughter at the registry office. Now she and Cynthia were trying to bring the bride to her senses, even giving her ammonia to sniff. Caroline was in tears. Mummy, why is it like this? Why am I so unlucky? Maybe I have some kind of curse on me, a celibacy crown. Everything was fine. Jason and I loved each other so much. And then this shame. I can't bear it. I'm going to be the center of everyone's eyes. Why are they doing this to me, man? Am I ugly or fat or ugly or stupid? Mrs. Vanessa put her arms around her daughter, rocked her like a little girl, and said, "Why do you talk so much about yourself, honey? What a curse. You've just got a bastard, that's all. He's a wimp, a mama's boy. His mama runs the place. You've seen it all. You're a doll, you're a good girl, you study and work. Forget about that bastard as if he never existed. And people will gossip. They'll stop. You'll meet a good guy, you'll see." Cynthia supported the woman. "Well, Caroline, it's true. Mom's got a point. Look at me. I don't give a damn about these suitors. They only make me nervous. You know what? I'm going to open some champagne and we're going to toast the start of your new happy life without Jason. We'll go to the mall. We'll go out. We'll go for ice cream. It's going to get better, mate. You just got to have faith. Let's raise our glasses and let your Jason go to hell if he's such a coward. It would be a misery to live with him." Caroline drained her glass and wiped her tears away with her veil. She felt a little better. Instead of despair, there was anger, and she said, "You are right. I won't cry anymore. In spite of him, I will become successful and happy, and he'll bite his elbows." Her mother stayed with her daughter for a couple of days, made sure that she calmed down a bit, and left for her village. She worked there as an accountant at the water company. Cynthia was instructed to keep an eye on Caroline because she was still under a lot of stress. The friends worked together in a small flower shop. They loved their work, looked after the flowers with care, assembled bouquets with a soul, trying to find out from the customer what he needed. Customers were satisfied, and the owner often praised. The salary was modest, of course, but nothing to start with. Cynthia felt sorry for her friend's behavior. After all, it was she who had introduced them. She'd known Jason's family for a long time. Their parents were friends, and Cynthia and Jason were on good terms. He'd come to their shop one day, wanting to give his mother a bouquet for the 8th of March. So, word by word, he met Caroline, started complimenting her and wooing her. They began to have an affair, but Cynthia had no idea that it would end so badly. She felt sorry for Caroline. She tried to distract her, to cheer her up. And 3 weeks later, her friend came to work so excited and immediately started. News, Carolina. You're going to fall down. I found out yesterday. I heard my mother and Jason's mother on the phone. It turns out that they've canceled your wedding with Jason on purpose because another bride, a foreigner, has come to see him. Mrs. Gwen dug her up somewhere, invited her, and slipped her to Jason, and he couldn't resist. Those bastards. I never thought Jason would be so spineless. This lady's got a lot of money, and she's willing to invest in Jason and his parents' family business. That's the arithmetic. And you have nothing to do with it, so don't beat yourself up about it. Caroline was shocked. She turned pale and kept rubbing the shiny paper in her hands. What other bride? So did he date both me and the other one? Oh, Mummy, what a shame. So, Jason traded me for money. Did he? Cynthia, it's so disgusting. It makes me want to disappear, to go under the ground, to get out of town. I feel like everyone in the world is looking at me and judging me and gossiping. Why don't I leave everything and go to my mum's in the village? I'm so sick, Cynthia. I don't even want to get up in the morning. The girl brushed away her tears, breathed often, and tried to pull herself together. Cynthia encouraged her. I'm sorry for the bad news, but you'd rather hear it from me than from others. Don't be a fool. What are you going to do in the township? There's no proper work there. So what if he found himself a foreigner? Let him go to her. I know his mum. She wouldn't like you anyway. She talks down to my parents too, always showing her superiority. We'll find you a better fiancé too, you'll see. Caroline shook her head. No, I've had enough of suitors. I won't open my heart to anyone else, and I don't want to be betrayed again. Thank you, Cynthia, for your support. I would be lost without you. Let's get to work, or the flowers will all wilt, and the landlady will scold. It was as if Caroline had been unlucky on purpose. She'd already run into Jason and his new girlfriend twice at the mall. He'd been proudly leading the woman on his arm, and being so polite to her. Caroline didn't know what he saw in her, obviously older than he was, and a whole head taller. She had an unpleasant face and squinting eyes. Yes, she was dressed smartly and expensively, but was that happiness? It was so painful for the girl to look at it. Everything inside clenched, and she hurried to get lost in the crowd so that she would not be noticed. Carolina studied at the Institute of Public Catering as a technologist by correspondence. She loved cooking, experimenting, and dreamed that one day she would work in a restaurant. In the meantime, she sold bouquets. She had to live on something. After the breakup of relations with her fiancé, something in her broke. She didn't want to eat or get up in the morning. She still cried at night, hugging Jason's shirt. She couldn't get him out of her mind, no matter how hard she tried. But one day everything changed dramatically. Her mum came to see her unexpectedly. Caroline had never seen her like this before, eyes burning, eager to share the amazing news with her daughter. The woman recounted. Caroline, I'll show you something like this. Look at this. You read carefully, not look at me. It turns out that Mrs. Marion is dead. What a grief, we didn't know anything. A sudden heart attack. She had a calf on the coast, remember when we used to visit her? You were just a little girl, weren't you? Well, Mrs. Marion left me both her house and her cafe. Can you imagine that? She was a lonely, ironclad businesswoman. Never got married, nobody could stand her difficult character for long, and God never gave her children. I'm ashamed, even embarrassed. She and I didn't call each other often, and we saw each other even less often. I didn't even expect this from her. But what a gift from fate. Caroline opened her mouth in surprise. Well, what are we going to do now? Are you going to move there, Mum? Or what to do? I feel sorry for Mrs. Marion. She wasn't old yet. Mrs. Vanessa took a drink of water and continued. So what have I come for? Daughter, I don't need this cafe. I don't want to leave the village. My whole life has been spent there. And I'm old again. I have 5 years left before I retire. I thought you should go there. Tomorrow we'll go to the notary. I'll register everything for you. You're young. You've got your whole life ahead of you. What's keeping you here now? You're a correspondence student. This way you'll have your own business. You'll forget that bastard Jason sooner. Do you agree? Caroline glowed and hugged her mum. Thank you, Mummy. Who would turn down an offer like that? It's my dream coming true. It may not be a restaurant, but it's not bad to have a cafe. And this is Mrs. Marion. First of all, thank her for taking care of distant relatives. Of course I agree. I was thinking of moving somewhere else. It's really hard for me here now. I can't believe I'll be at the seaside soon. It's been so long since we've been there. You'll come and visit me, won't you, Mummy? This is the happiest day of my life. It's true what they say, a black streak is always followed by a white one. And so it is. And so Caroline's life began to change. For the first few days, she just couldn't get out of the warm sea. It was as if it embraced her and calmed her down. She lounged under the warm rays of the sun, wandered along the coast, and all hardship seemed to retreat, went somewhere far away. The girl mastered her new business, Mrs. Marion's cottage and cafe. After the death of its owner, it was temporarily closed. The girl looked around inside. Everything was well made and cozy. Pretty light-colored tables and lace tablecloths. Quite a decent menu in the window. The dishes are all simple, homemade borscht, okrushka, cutlets, mashed potatoes. Too banal, thought Caroline, and decided to add a twist. Some crowning dish of the institution, so that all visitors liked it. But that's later. First, you need to recruit staff. The girl placed an advert for vacancies. An old friend and neighbor of the late Mrs. Marion, Mr. Carl, helped her a lot. This good-looking old man with a cane and a neat gray beard seemed to know absolutely everyone in town and helped with the selection of candidates. Caroline, for instance, was very fond of a certain full-figured woman cook. She painted herself so well, but Mr. Carl whispered to Caroline, "I wouldn't recommend Sharon. Wherever she has worked, she gets caught stealing, dragging bags of groceries around. Do you want her? Such problems with her will not do without problems, my dear." In contrast, the young shaggy-haired boy who would ask for some work did not inspire Caroline with confidence, but Mr. Carl nodded. "You shouldn't look at him that way. Appearances are often deceptive. He has a dysfunctional family. He didn't have a normal childhood. That's why he looks like that. But Michael is a great person. I have complete confidence in him. He saved my grandson last year when he was drowning. I offered him money and any kind of help, but he wouldn't give it. He said he couldn't do anything else. A man like that wouldn't cheat, believe me. Take Michael on as an assistant cook in the kitchen. He'll be as loyal as a dog. Believe an old Jew. I will not advise you badly." So, with the help of a friend of Mrs. Marion's, Caroline recruited staff. She honestly warned them all that this business was new to her and that they all had to work hard together to make a profit and, consequently, a salary. They bought groceries and opened a cafe. The name Cove was not changed, and the business slowly started. Chef Thomas turned out to be a professional. Any simple fish in his performance was a real masterpiece. Stuffed squid with mushrooms and cheese became the crown dish of the place. Thomas knew how to make it juicy and tender, not rubbery. Caroline herself stood at the cooker as well as everyone else. She was interested in learning and gaining experience, and the presence of the hostess in the kitchen stimulated the staff to try harder and not to relax. Michael turned out to be her age and a really nice guy. He wasn't lazy, he worked hard. They became friends with Caroline, often went to the sea to swim, and talked a lot. The guy did not hesitate to talk about himself. "You know, Carolina, we used to live well in my childhood. My dad was a fisherman. He used to go fishing. I had a little sister, Joyce. Mom was a market trader. She was different back then. She laughed a lot, kind and gentle. I remember Dad's hands so rough and calloused, but so dear. Once he and 3 other fishermen did not return from fishing. Their boat got caught in a storm, and they all drowned. And one disaster after another fell on our family. Only my father was buried. 2 years later, my sister died. She burned to death in a month from a serious illness. Mom and I were left alone. She turned dark with grief, and as if she forgot about my existence, started drinking, shouting. I was so angry with her. I was still a teenager myself. I also wanted her to take me in her arms, to pity me, to have a heart-to-heart talk, after all. But I couldn't get through to her, and then she quit her job. I had nothing to live on. I was working as hard as I could, barely making ends meet, and then men started coming onto her. It pissed me off so much. We fought, even fought. In general, I barely finished school and asked to join the army, just to get away from home. And when I came back, it was all very bad. The house was a mess, and a complete mess, and my mom was sick. She could hardly walk. The damn vodka killed her. I looked for a job urgently. I buy medicines for my mom, take care of her, try to keep her clean. I pity her very much and love her, but still we are like strangers. It hurts so much. I can't even bring my girlfriend home. I'm ashamed. Caroline shook her head, encouraged the boy, and unnoticeably told him everything about her fiance's betrayal and her pain. A year flew by like a day. Caroline had already gained a little experience, and everything was going well. The wound in her soul healed little by little. There was no time to be sad. She had a lot of things to do. And then the past again reminded of itself. That day, Caroline supervised the preparations for the banquet. All the employees were fussing, running around, setting the tables. 2 people entered the cafe, an elderly woman in dark glasses and a wide-brimmed beach hat, and a young man with a suitcase. The waitress came running into the kitchen and announced, "Caroline, there is someone there to see you," they say, on a personal matter. The girl was surprised and went out into the hall. She was stunned when she saw Jason and his mother. They were stomping around the bar and staring at her like that. Mrs. Gwen started first. "Good afternoon, Caroline. Oh, you look so pretty, you look so marvelous. And your cafe is so cozy. And we've come to see you. We want to talk to you." The girl frowned. "I'm not at all glad to meet you, and I'm very busy. How is it that such important people have condescended to visit an abandoned bride? Let's hurry up, there's no time. The banquet is coming up." Jason mumbled, eyes downcast. "Caroline, I'm so sorry to you, I know. I'm so sorry. I fell for Megan's charms and left you. I was a scoundrel. She's a con artist. She took advantage of us and ruined us. Took everything and went back overseas. My mom and I are bankrupt now, we're broke. Jason, what a sad story. I'm going to cry. Why do I need to know all this? You have your life, I have mine. And what you want from me, I don't know. Or do you expect me to be a complete fool and forgive you after everything you've done?" Jason blushed like a cancer and didn't know what to say. His mother began to wail. "Oh, Caroline, you're such a fool. We don't think that way at all. You are so good. You're running the place. You've rubbed everyone's nose in it. Well, that's what we've come for. Take us to work. Even as a laborer, we have nothing to live on. But don't send us away, please." Caroline suddenly smiled predatorily. "Anything you say. So what, Mrs. Gwen? Are you going to go and work as a dishwasher? Jason, for example, will you be a grocery boy? Those are the only jobs I've got. I don't need any directors or managers around here. But I don't think you'll be satisfied with the salary. You're used to a luxurious life." The woman immediately agreed. "We agree. When can we start?" "As soon as we rent a room, we'll come straight to you. But you understand, Caroline, we really are on the verge of despair. We're past it. Forgive us. Thank you for being there for us. We won't let you down. We'll do our best." Caroline took pity and took Jason and his mother to task. He did look bad and looked like a beaten dog. He didn't have his former gloss and importance. I guess things were really getting worse for them. The remnants of former love stirred in the girl's soul, but she still couldn't believe that this was all happening for real. What if things really that bad if they agreed to such low-paying positions? Things were going well at first. Jason had been faithfully carrying groceries, doing his best, trying to reconnect with Caroline. And Mrs. Gwen, surprisingly, wasn't lazy. She kept quiet, worked hard. There wasn't a trace of her arrogance left. Caroline still didn't trust Jason and kept her distance, not letting him think he was forgiven. But the ice in her soul had long since melted. She was so tired of being alone. It was hard to carry everything on a woman's fragile shoulders, so she thought about starting over, giving her fiancé a second chance, especially since he begged for it so much. But soon strange things began to happen. First, a few menus disappeared, then the recipes for their specialities, and then the accounts. Caroline didn't realize anything. Who would want it? And when their competitors had exactly the same dishes on their menus, and they lowered their prices, it was clear to her that she had an enemy in her team. And then there was Michael, who kept whispering to Caroline. Caroline, you shouldn't have hired your ex-fiancé and his mom. They're bad people, they're up to no good. I overheard them talking by chance, just as I was emptying the rubbish out of the tank. They're up to something against you again. They want to take away your cafe and ruin it. They're making plans. You should sack them before the trouble comes. The girl didn't believe it and was angry. Michael, it can't be. How can a dishwasher and a chauffeur hurt me? But it's ridiculous, isn't it? I think you're exaggerating and exaggerating. Doesn't Mrs. Gwen do a good job? She washes faster than the machine she tries, everything's shiny. And Jason doesn't do a bad job of unloading his own boxes. Why should I sack them? Yeah, they used to be different, I'll grant you that. But I can see how they'd both changed. Besides, I helped them out in a difficult situation. Why would they do anything bad to me? To hurt themselves. But still, Caroline became more careful. She locked the door of the office every time and began to look at the newcomers. After all, it was with their appearance that she really began to have problems. But, as it turned out, it was still a flower. One day, Caroline was checking reports and payroll, counting money from the safe, as Michael suddenly came in with a cup of coffee. He began to warn her again that Jason and his mother were plotting. The girl waved him away. Michael, thanks for the coffee, but you go get to work. I don't have time for this right now. We'll talk later. I'm very busy. Just then there was a knock on the office and Jason walked in. Caroline, I've got the groceries there and Catherine isn't here. Who's going to take it? I'll unload it myself, but I need to check the receipts and sign for it. She replied. That's all right. I'll do it myself. Go on. What a stupid day. Then she got busy, and only the next morning she discovered that the money was missing from the safe, the whole amount. She was horrified. My God, what on earth is going on? How am I going to pay people's salaries now? So who dared? She got everyone together and made them empty their bags, but there was nothing there, and no one was in a hurry to confess. Caroline's mood was worse than ever, such an unpleasant incident. Then Mrs. Gwen took her aside and whispered, I know who stole the money. Michael it is, no one else. I found out something about him. He's got a criminal record. That's him. You should send him away, not coddle him. Caroline replied sharply, I'll sort it out myself, go to work. You're always running to me and gossiping. Caroline called the assistant chef to her office and asked her head-ons, Michael, tell me honestly, did you take the money? Don't lie. You came in yesterday just as I was counting it. Also, do you really have a criminal record? Why didn't you tell me about it? I thought we were friends, I trusted you. And the guy turned pale and blinked a lot. Why, Caroline? Do you really think I could have robbed you? I'm even offended. I've been working for you a year, and I care for you, if you want to know. I would never do anything to hurt you. You shouldn't have accused me like that. I had a suspended criminal record when I was a kid. I stole a tape recorder from my neighbor's car, and it wasn't me, it was my girlfriend's. I was acquitted, actually. And what was I supposed to tell about it? It's embarrassing. And Caroline threw her pen on the table and replied sharply, I don't understand anything. Who stole the money and why? I'll have to go to the police. It's no joke, it's a big sum. God, how tired I am. The inspectors are always coming round, competitors are doing nasty things, and now this. It's bad luck. If it goes on like this, we'll go bankrupt. Michael got angry too. How can you not see the obvious? Jason's got you all in a tizzy with his sweet talk. He came by yesterday too, didn't you forget? So he knew about the money. But you hear me, we need to follow him and his mom. I'm sure they're hiding the money somewhere. There hasn't been a single accident all year until they showed up. They're nothing but trouble. You can't be so gullible, especially with someone who's already done the mean thing once. Caroline thought about it and decided to consult Mr. Carl. He'd be sure to give good advice. He'd helped her out more than once. She went to him after work and told him everything as it was. He was silent for a long time, tapping his cane on the floor, beating out a tune. Then he said, You're naive, Caroline. Mrs. Marion wouldn't have let those crooks in. They'd be out of here in a heartbeat, and you'd be sorry for yourselves. Michael's absolutely right. We need to keep a close eye on them, and I need to talk to them in person. I'm a good judge of character. In the darkened room, mother and son dined and debated heatedly. Jason, as usual, whined and complained. Mom, can we stop this comedy? We're almost done. Let's leave. How much longer am I going to humiliate myself in front of Caroline, spinning the bloody tire? I can't do it anymore. I can't lift boxes for a penny. And I'm sick of living in this doghouse. Mrs. Gwen shushed him. You were a whiner when you were a kid, and you still are. That's right. Almost. And we need to see this plan through. What's not to understand? Look, he's tired. Don't you think I'm tired? What do my hands look like? I hate that Carolina. I have to smile sweetly at her. Do you think I like it? Be patient. Soon we'll be finished and we'll live well again. Why is she coming to us? She's bringing some dickhead. Why are you sitting there? Go and open the door? Caroline introduced Mr. Carl and asked for tea. And they began to talk. The girl could only marvel at how skillfully he asked questions, simple but with a twist, and how nervous Mrs. Gwen became in the end, though she tried to pretend that everything was all right. As they left the house, Mr. Carl said quietly, I can tell you now for sure they're the ones harming you. There's no doubt about it. Here's what we'll do. Tomorrow morning we'll drive my car to a place. From there you can see the house and everything is visible, and we'll also visit my friend. He has a son who is an investigator. He'll definitely help us get to the bottom of this. I promised Mrs. Marion I'd help you, and I'll keep my word. Don't worry, Caroline, we'll bring the villains to justice. Jason lurked behind the door and heard everything. He came back and told his mother. She said firmly, That's why I didn't like that little prick he was sniffing around. You're right, son. Things have gone too far. Time to end it. You get dressed now and do this. The next day, Caroline put aside all business and got into Mr. Carl's car. They pulled onto the motorway, and then the unimaginable happened. The man pressed the brake pedal, but the car continued to drive forward. What's the matter? The brakes don't work. But I had the car serviced only the day before yesterday. Everything was normal. God, what can we do? We're going to crash, shouted Mr. Carl. When she realized that the accident was unavoidable, Caroline squeezed her eyes shut. Then there was a bump and darkness. Michael had been restless since morning. Called Caroline many times, but the phone was switched off. He was panicking. Something's wrong, I can feel it. Caroline is never late. And here it's 2 p.m. and she's still not here. The house is closed too. It's my fault, I'm a fool. I should have called the police yesterday. I'm sure it was Jason and his mum. I'll run to Mr. Walter Johnson's at the station. I can't just sit here and do nothing. The boy rushed to the police station and began to tell Mr. Walter everything in a confused way. He'd helped him get back on the straight and narrow. He was known as an honest and incorruptible officer. The coroner listened, made a phone call, and then said, Caroline, right? I want to make you sad, Michael. She's in the hospital, still unconscious, had surgery. It's good that you're here. We're looking into the cause of the accident, and we should notify the next of kin. Don't you know anything about them? The boy turned white and blurted out, My God, she's alive. What hospital is she in? I'll run there right away. What kind of accident? It's not like she has a car. What happened? Carolina has a mum. Her number's in Carolina's phone. We should definitely call her. The investigator threw on his jacket and nodded to the guy. Let's go. It's quicker that way. I'll tell you all about it on the way. Caroline and her neighbor, Mr. Carl, were driving along the motorway today, and the brakes failed. It's being analyzed now, but it's already clear that the brake hose was damaged by someone. So someone wanted them to crash and die. The case is open. The investigation is underway. Well, do you have any idea who would want your mistress dead? It doesn't happen often in our town. The lad answered eagerly. I know, of course. That's what I came to you for. We've been working normally for a whole year. We have such a friendly team, just like a family. Everyone respected Carolina. She's a great person, really. She cooked with us, communicated with us, paid our salaries and bonuses. Everything was fine. And then came these two, and everything went wrong. Michael talked about his ex-fiancée and his mother, how they had once been mean to Caroline, and what had now happened at the cafe. The investigator suddenly slowed down and looked at the guy so intently. I see you're a little too well informed about the landlady's private life. Did she tell you all this herself? It's weird. Michael blushed and answered honestly. She and I were very good friends. We often went to the sea, we chatted a lot. It wasn't just about work that I told more about myself, but she shared somehow. In fact, I fell in love with her a long time ago, but I'm afraid to admit it. Who am I, and who is she? Why do I need her? But I'm very worried about Caroline, and I want to help her. We will punish Jason and his mother. Otherwise, I'm sure the cafe will go bankrupt. They're the ones who stole the money from the safe and caused the accident. Help us, Mr. Walter. You're our only hope. The investigator nodded. I promise I'll look into it. And you, Michael, call her mother and have her come here. Someone has to run the cafe, and she should know about everything. At the hospital, Michael was told that Mr. Carl was almost all right, only his leg was broken. Caroline wasn't doing so well, she was still unconscious. The doctors were doing everything they could to get her out. Mrs. Vanessa wasn't herself that day. Everything was falling out of her hands, and she was anxious. She couldn't find a place to be. She decided to call her daughter to see how she was doing. But her phone was switched off, and when she finally saw her daughter's incoming, she started shouting. Caroline, my daughter, how are you? I can't reach you. Are you all right? And then a man's voice answered. This is Caroline's mom. Hello. I'm Michael, the assistant chef from the cafe. Don't worry, but I've got some bad news. Caroline's been in an accident and she's in hospital in a serious condition. You'd better come down. It's all her ex-fiancé Jason's doing. She shouldn't have taken pity on him and hired him. Mrs. Vanessa sank heavily into the chair. Her legs felt woozy and her heart was pounding frantically. What a horror. I'm leaving at once. I don't understand. How does San show up in those parts? What's going on over there? What hospital is Caroline in? Michael quickly dictated the address and said, I'll meet you at the station. Just text me when the train arrives. We're really looking forward to seeing you. Caroline needs help right now. We can't do without you. Mrs. Vanessa immediately called at work and begged for leave. The boss refused. Well, you know, Mrs. Vanessa, and who's going to work for you as it is? There are no people. Nobody wants to go on a meager salary, and the report is coming up. 1 week, no more, or I'll be forced to sack you. The woman shouted in her hearts. Do whatever you want. My daughter is in trouble, and I will save her. I don't care if you fire me or not. Michael met Mrs. Vanessa at the train station. The first thing they did was go to the hospital. The woman cried for a long time, looking at her daughter. It was as if the daughter was asleep. Her lips were pale and lifeless, and all around the daughter were flashing sensors. The doctor consoled the woman as best he could. Well, don't be so sad. It's too early to say anything, and even more so to mourn. Caroline is young. We hope her body will recover quickly and her condition will stabilize. You have to believe. Miracles do happen, the doctor said. Mrs. Vanessa whispered to her daughter, fixing her hair. Get well, sunshine. I kicked that rascal out of the cafe. He'll answer for everything. It's going to be all right, baby. Mummy's there for you. We'll get through this together. The woman was very angry and came into the cafe unexpectedly. Jason and Mrs. Gwen were startled, not expecting to see her here. Mrs. Vanessa said menacingly, Well, rejoice. Are you trying to ruin my daughter's life again? No way. You're fired. You get out of here, both of you, and don't breathe a word of this. If I'd known you'd cheated my little girl again, I'd never have seen you here. Surprisingly, Jason was quick to agree, and he and his mother quietly left the cafe. Mrs. Vanessa whispered to Michael, Call the investigator and let's follow them. I'm sure they're hiding the loot somewhere. I won't let them get away with it. Jason and Mrs. Gwen sat in their rented room until the evening, and it was only under the cover of night that they set off. When they looked round, there was no one. They dashed through the rotten fence of the abandoned summer camp. They went round the main building and turned to the outbuildings. They pulled a couple of bricks out of a niche and pulled out a dusty gym bag. Jason started to call someone and whispered, "Yeah, we've got everything. We're meeting as agreed. I remember everything. The cafe will burn down tonight, and I'll give you the paperwork. You can do whatever you want." The couple split up. Mrs. Gwen was left waiting for someone on the premises. Jason, his cap pulled down over his eyes, rushed to the cafe, took a petrol can out of the bushes and began to douse everything. Then he started flicking the lighter, but it, as it turned out, went dead. The guy was very nervous. And then he was literally blinded by the light of the headlights. Operatives jumped out of the minibus and quickly rounded up the criminal. He was so scared he didn't even try to run. Mr. Walter grinned. "Well, there you are, my little dove, caught in the act. We've been following you for a long time. That's quite a gang you and your mum put together. They worked well together, there's no telling. The owner of the cafe was almost eliminated. They scanned all the documents and decided to sell them to competitors. And I brought back the money I stole from the safe. They'd have left like that, look for it later. But then a guy named Michael showed up and ruined everything, just in time to sound the alarm. How did you, Citizen Cooper, come to live like this? Once a businessman, now a criminal. Well, prison will fix you up in no time. I'll make sure you and your mother get the maximum sentence." The cowardly Jason trembled and immediately began to defend himself. "It wasn't me. I didn't mean to, it was Mum. She made me do it, let her go to jail. I didn't mean to kill Caroline, I swear, and I didn't mean to set the cafe on fire either. If I cooperate with the investigation, will I get my sentence reduced? Caroline's alive, and I didn't set the fire. I'll tell it like it is." Mrs. Gwen was arrested at the same hour and the money and documents stolen from the safe were confiscated. The angry woman shouted curses at Caroline and lashed out, even managing to bite a policeman. She yelled, "You scum. Carolina's a tenacious one. You've ruined everything for me again. She's got her loyal friends, and they're digging their noses into the ground. Damn her to hell. This bride has been in our family ever since she came here, and all the troubles have started. The relatives gave her everything for nothing. She was a nobody, and now she's the owner of a cafe. How is that fair? Jason and I are ruined, and she's on a roll, and I'm supposed to accept that. Yeah, I've been thinking night and day about how to get to her and take it all away, and I almost succeeded." Mr. Walter was amazed and even interrogated. "I still don't understand why you hate Caroline so much. I mean, she didn't do anything to you. In fact, she went to another town. Why are you taking revenge on her?" Mrs. Gwen was angry. "You wouldn't understand. That girl wanted to take my only son away from me, to sneak into our family. And Jason fell so in love with her. He started to drift away from me, and I had such a hard time giving birth to him. He was so sick as a baby. I devoted my whole life to him. I couldn't let him get involved with that penniless hick. I could barely talk my son out of marrying her. I sabotaged their wedding, convinced him I'd found him a better bride, but I was wrong. Megan had me fooled. We thought she was joining our company. That's what we agreed. Turns out she's a con artist. She took everything from me and my son. And I've been in business a long time. Everyone laughed at me. I was depressed. My son started to reproach me for ruining his life. Then I found out that this simple girl had inherited an inheritance and went to the sea. And now she's the owner of the cafe. I almost choked with envy. I knew how good-natured she was, always pitying everyone, helping everyone. So I decided to teach her a lesson." The investigator shook his head. "You are simply sick, obsessed with anger and envy. You need to be treated, do you understand? I have nothing more to talk about with this madwoman. It's all so clear." Jason and Mrs. Gwen were taken to prison. There was a trial ahead. Mrs. Vanessa rolled up her sleeves and worked with Mr. Carl and Michael to clean up the cafe. She was an accountant with a lifetime of experience. Mr. Carl had an entrepreneurial streak. Together they quickly got things right and the staff finally got their money. The cafe was back up and running. Mrs. Vanessa and Michael took turns at Caroline's bedside and prayed that she would come to her senses as soon as possible. They read her books, talked a lot. It's dark, everything is black. But it's not scary at all. It's like being enveloped in a soft weightlessness. Nothing hurts, you don't feel anything. And then suddenly you hear Michael's voice. "Caroline, I never told you this. I was afraid you'd push me away, wouldn't understand, but now I want you to know. I love you very much, you Caroline. I'm ready to be by your side all my life, to protect you, to keep you safe. I'd do anything to make you wake up and get better. I beg you, come back to us. Wake up. I need you so much. Mom needs you." The darkness began to dissipate little by little, and the girl tried to open her heavy blind eyelids. She desperately wanted to wake up, to live and love again. Michael watched in shock as Caroline opened her eyes, as she tried to jerk her arm open. He couldn't believe his happiness and began to call for help. Caroline twisted her head around and didn't realize where she was. Hospital. A doctor shines a torch in her eyes, asking her something. Michael is stomping down the aisle. He waves at her and laughs, tears glistening in his eyes. The girl couldn't believe it had been almost a month. It seemed like only a couple of days. Her mom was crying, kissing her and wailing. "Daughter, honey, you're awake. Finally, everything will be all right now. I'm here for you. We are all very worried about you." The first words, the first steps were given to Carolina with great difficulty. She was literally learning everything anew, like a small child. Her body did not obey her at all. Every movement brought unbearable pain. Michael literally never left her side. He fed her from a spoon like a little girl, genuinely happy if she ate well. He surrounded her with attention and care and looked so faithfully into her eyes. Caroline looked at this simple and kind guy in a completely different way, and she wondered, "How stupid I am! How did I not notice before?" Michael was devoted to me from the first day and did everything to make me notice and feel how much he loved me. And what did I do? Took everything for granted and didn't notice him at all. Let Jason's scoundrel back into my life. Why? Why did I let him ruin my life again? Michael had warned me, tried to get through to me, but it was like I was blind and deaf. But no, now I won't miss my chance to be happy. A month later, Caroline was discharged. Her mother set the table at home and invited the closest people, Mr. Carl and Michael. She wanted everyone to celebrate her daughter's miraculous healing. Over lunch, Mrs. Vanessa was eager to tell Caroline about the business at the cafe. "You don't worry, daughter, about anything and don't blame yourself for the mistake. We fixed it. The cafe is doing just fine now. We've got plenty of customers. Thomas doesn't have time to cook. And we've also decided to do a bit of a makeover." Michael suggested it. "We want to make it look like a ship with symbols. And we've ordered special costumes for the waitresses, navy coats and caps. We think this will bring more people to us. At least our competitors don't have anything like that. What do you think of the idea?" Caroline cheered and agreed. "That's great, my mommy, you're all so good. I would be lost without you. I guess I'm still a little inexperienced. I don't understand people at all. I let the scoundrels under my nose and almost let you down, Mammy, and almost ruined my business. I don't want you to go away. After all, one head is good, but two heads are better. Especially as you're an experienced accountant. You can see at once if there are any mistakes or misjudgments." Mrs. Vanessa glowed and looked at Mr. Carl strangely. Then she decided to tell her daughter. "Caroline, we have news for you. I purposely didn't tell you yet, waiting till you were well and strong. I have paid off my job, sold my flat in the village, and now I will move here for good. I really enjoyed working at the cafe, and you could use the help. But that's not the main thing. Mr. Carl and I are together now. You see, it turns out we have so much in common. I'm completely enchanted by the intelligence and gallantry of this marvelous man. And, he offered me his hand in marriage, and I accepted. I've lived alone all my life. I've raised you on my own feet. You know how hard it was for us. I didn't expect to have a life of my own in my old age. I'd given up on myself a long time ago. But Mr. Carl melted my heart. I'm ashamed to say this, but your mum fell in love like a schoolgirl. We've decided to marry Mr. Carl and live next door to you in his house. I really hope you will understand me and not judge me harshly. Caroline looked at her mother and at Mr. Carl, and only now noticed how their eyes were burning, how Mammy had blossomed, how Mr. Carl had grown younger. The girl answered joyfully, "What a surprise! But why should I mind? After all, I wish you nothing but happiness, Mummy. And I'd love to be at your wedding. You're quite right, Mr. Carl is a great man, a loyal friend and our first assistant in all our affairs. You can only dream of having someone like that around. It's true what they say, love is for all ages." Michael also congratulated Mrs. Vanessa and raised his glass at the table. He wanted to say something to Caroline and did not dare and looked at her like that. The girl understood everything without words, took the glass in her hands and began to speak. "I want to address you now, Michael. I remember your confession the day I came to my senses. I remember every word you said. You know, it's probably what brought me back to life. I was so desperate to wake up and live and love again. I'm sorry I didn't notice before. And now I have something very important to tell you. I love you too, I really do. And I would like to be together with you, if you don't mind, and haven't changed your mind yet." The guy couldn't believe what he was hearing. He'd never dreamed of such a thing. Jumping up, he dropped his fork. "You're still asking? I'd do anything for you, just to be near you. To see you every day, to wake up and fall asleep next to you. Today is amazing, the happiest day of my life." Mr. Carl coughed and suddenly suggested, "Young people, so what's the holdup? Vanessa and I were going to apply on Monday. Why don't you come with us and have a double wedding? I wouldn't mind. There's not a minute to lose at our age. Time flies very fast, and we're not getting any younger. After the death of my wife 15 years ago, I thought that I would never again meet the woman whom I would like to marry and make her the mistress of my house. I resigned myself to the slow, lonely life of a widower. Mrs. Marion, my neighbor, and I have been friends all our lives. And, I'll be honest, she suggested that I come and live with her. But we both realized we were very different. She was a sort of iron lady. You either had to obey her, or it wouldn't work the other way round. But I'm a difficult character. She and I, even as friends, sometimes argued so heatedly that glasses flew. So we decided to stay friends. When I met Mrs. Vanessa, I knew she was the one. My woman, smart, sensible, but also very wise in a feminine way. She can smooth over any conflict. She's my muse, honestly. So guys, do support my proposal?" Caroline laughed and nodded. "And you're right, as always, Mr. Carl. Time flies, so why waste it? I'm sure I couldn't find a better husband than Michael. So personally, I'm in. Maybe I'll get married properly the second time round. If the groom doesn't change his mind and run away." Michael threw his arms around Caroline. "Thank you, Caroline. I'll never change my mind. I'll be the best husband to you, you'll see. I've loved you so much since the first minute I saw you. You're the only one in my heart, and so will always be, I'm sure." A month later, a double wedding took place in the registry office of a southern town. It was modest, not at all pompous, but many of the marrying couple watched with amusement, as carefully elderly groom, with a cane leads under the arm of a charming lady in a long festive pastel-colored dress. And next to a handsome guy literally shining with happiness and circling around the owner of the local cafe. Caroline was very worried, remembering her past unsuccessful marriage, held tightly under Michael's arm, as if afraid that he would disappear somewhere, disappear, vaporous. The townspeople wondered. What did this businesswoman find in a simple son of a fisherman? He doesn't have a penny to his name. Strange couple. And only Caroline herself knew what she was doing. She has now realized from her bitter experience that happiness is not about money and wealth. True happiness is in the fact that together, hand in hand, to overcome all the hardships and difficulties, to rejoice together in new successes, and know that you will not be deceived and not betrayed. No matter what happened, she and Michael still worked together in the cafe. Surprisingly, there were no bosses and subordinates in their well-coordinated, united team. Everything was done together. Whoever was free helped in the kitchen. Caroline was happy to cook the most complicated dishes with Thomas on an equal footing. It gave her a special pleasure. And then she watched with bated breath from behind the screen to see how the customers reacted to them, whether they liked them or not. Michael had become a right-hand man, but he wasn't arrogant. As before, he could peel potatoes and grate carrots. And even in cleaning and cutting fish, perhaps, Michael was not equal. It was as if he could playfully process a whole tray of fish in an hour, and he'd sing songs to keep the mood light. After all, they were all working for the same result, and they all realized it. Mrs. Vanessa kept the books and monitored the accounts, and Mr. Carl was in charge of human resources. The competitors envied Caroline. How do they manage to have no turnover and no theft? None of the customers have ever filed a complaint. It's amazing. Mrs. Vanessa and Caroline put a beautiful marble monument to Mrs. Marion. They often visited their relative at the cemetery, took care of the grave, and each time never tired of thanking her for the fact that she left them not only an inheritance, but you could say gave them a ticket to a new happy life. 5 years passed. Jason's fate had turned out sadly. His mother, Mrs. Gwen, used to a life of luxury, became obsessed with the idea of revenge. She was eventually declared insane and placed in a psychiatric hospital. She went completely insane. The man himself barely served his time. Prison broke him completely. There was its own cruel reality. He was beaten a lot and often, forced to perform humiliating tasks and to serve in the cell. They immediately smelled him as a victim, realized that he was cowardly and could not stand up for himself. So they abused him as best they could. Jason, who had been ill since childhood, caught pneumonia several times in prison. Wounds and abrasions from beatings healed very badly. He left prison sick and exhausted. No one needed him in his town, and the man went south, closer to the sea. With a criminal record, there was no chance of a normal job. He was taken in out of pity by a fisherman, an old vagrant who was just as bad. Now the two of them fished together and lived a miserable existence. During this time, Jason had come to realize a lot of things. Surprisingly, he didn't hate Caroline at all, unlike his mad mother. He had never even wished her harm. It was just that, because of his soft and timid nature, he'd always gone along with his mother's wishes and carried out her wild ideas without question. Jason regretted a million times that he'd been so cruel to Caroline. She alone had loved him so devotedly and selflessly. Once he'd been hired to clean the beach in the early morning hours, stringing papers and wrappers on a stick, collecting empty bottles to be turned in later. He didn't squander cigarette butts either. There were no holiday makers at this time, and suddenly one family came to the beach, Dad, Mom, and a little girl of about 3 years old. The adults did a warm-up, a short jog, and took turns to swim in the clear sea with pleasure. The little girl was enthusiastically molding dolls in the sand. The couple cuddled and enjoyed the first rays of sunshine. Jason couldn't help but admire it. The soft silhouette of the woman seemed surprisingly familiar, and when she spoke, he realized, "It's Caroline. She's so much better looking. The childbirth has done her good." Instead of a skinny girl, he saw a gorgeous woman with a smooth, attractive shape standing before him. A tanned, athletic man was hugging her gently, cooing in her ear, and she was laughing. A lump rose in Jason's throat. He wanted to run over, to touch her hand for a moment, to look into her kind, slightly sad eyes again. But he restrained himself and looked at himself as if from the outside a drunken drifter. 3 teeth missing, unshaven, in stretched jeans and a frayed t-shirt. No, he'd rather fail at this place than let Caroline see him like this. He quickly picked up his equipment and wandered back to the shed, swallowing tears. It was so sickening, so disgusting. He covered his head with his hands and bit his bloody lips, realizing that he had ruined his own life by ruining everything. The lifeguard came in and yelled at Jason. "Worker, are you drunk or asleep? Did you clean up the mess? Then get out of here. Don't just sit there. Come back early tomorrow. Here you go. I've earned it." The man took the pittance and walked towards the shack. On the way, he couldn't stand it and bought a bottle of cheap vodka and a chiburk. His friend was already waiting for him, rubbing his hands together, and they sat down to drink, crying to each other about their lives and pouring bitter water on their misfortune. Caroline, on the other hand, was enjoying motherhood and was perfectly happy. After the wedding, she did not forget about Michael's mother. Together, they persuaded her to go to a clinic and undergo a long course of treatment for alcohol addiction. Many times the woman wanted to snap. There was aggression and hysterics and a frantic desire to give a damn about everything and again get drunk and forget, but still endured for the sake of her son. She saw what a good girl he found and really wanted him to no longer be ashamed of her. She finally realized that no matter how much you drink, you can't bring back the past. And her son was there, loving and caring for her, no matter what. Mrs. Betty, for the first time in her life, thanked Michael for everything and cried for a long time, asking for forgiveness. After all, it was because of her drunkenness and bad life Michael did not have a normal childhood. The other would have been in his place long ago, waved his hand and left the wrong mother. But the son was not like that. He persisted with her, believing that he had no right to betray the woman who had given him life, and she dared not let him down again. Mrs. Betty coped with her terrible addiction, and with the birth of her granddaughter, her life made sense again. Now the woman had no time to suffer. She put her house in order with the help of her son and daughter-in-law, started a vegetable garden, grew vegetables and grapes, and often took her granddaughter to her. She loved the little girl, as if remembering her deceased daughter every time. And when Beatrice reached out to her and babbled, "Grandma, I love you so much," the woman felt so warm, so good. She pressed the little girl to herself, stroked her curly blonde hair and whispered, "And I love you too, my sweet bun. Shall we go for a walk? Look what a ball I bought you. Let's play." Now the whole big family often celebrated all their holidays in their cafe. It so happened that on such days all the employees were released from their duties and sat together with them at the table, having fun, socializing, and really felt like part of Caroline's family. And the sea was stirring, rolling waves on the shore, nodding with the whispers of the surf and happy for them. Ryan moved skillfully through the city, trying to avoid the traffic jams on the road. His hands were shaking, his nerves were on edge, and a man's voice sounded over the speakerphone. "It can't be. It's not Emily," he answered the call. "I understand your shock, Mr. Ryan, but that's what we're waiting for you to identify. We need to make sure the woman on our table is your spouse, Emily." "I mean, she's quite young, only 31 years old. We wanted kids so badly," Ryan muttered. His insanely expensive sports car maneuvered between cars with ease. He was only a year older than his wife, but he already owned his own company and had a noticeable profit. The family didn't need anything and were respected both in and out of town. Emily had been complaining of chest pains for a long time. Neither of us gave it much thought. The words came out in a flood. The unexpected interlocutor listened to him quietly, accustomed to the behavior of people in grief. She worked hard. The whole business was held together by the two of us. No wonder I can't believe it. His voice sounded broken. "I'm dismissing all sorts of tests and autopsies in advance. There's no need for that at all. Emily has experienced enough pain as it is. Let her body not be touched." At the morgue, Ryan was met by pathologist Paul. "You and I spoke on the phone." He touched Ryan's shoulder lightly with a mournful face. "This way, please." Ryan made his way into a brightly lit room with green tiles on the walls. There was a body lying on a gurney under a sheet. "Oh my God," Ryan exclaimed. He could barely hold back the tears. As Paul pulled the sheet away from Emily's face, Ryan whispered, "That's my girl." "I'm sorry for your loss," Paul said. He'd seen a lot of things in his job, but seeing the emotions of the relatives of the dead had always been difficult. Ryan could tell by the look on his face how broken he was, but still held himself in check, not letting the tears spill over. He gingerly touched the lifeless face. Emily's body was still warm. "She was alive until half an hour ago," he said thoughtfully. "Why didn't I know this morning was the last time I'd talked to her?" A few minutes later, Ryan stepped out into the hallway and his face changed. He turned to the orderlies with a calm look. "Guys, I have a favor to ask of you. You won't be offended by the price. We need to get to the funeral as soon as possible. And unnecessary fussing with tests and autopsies will only stall things. You better hurry up and release the body. Get everything ready." Ryan held out a few bills to the orderlies. "This is between you and me. Absolutely. We won't tell anyone," Alex promised. He and his partner had been frequent participants in illegal activities after a couple of sentences for extortion and disorderly conduct. The two prison mates had only managed to get jobs as morgue attendants. "I'm counting on you." Ryan was pleased with the way things were set up, but was in no hurry to leave for the office. He still had to inform all of his family and friends about the untimely death of his dear wife, listen to tons of condolences, and receive many visitors. But for now, he had to make sure Paul didn't cause him any problems, and Emily wouldn't bother him again. Finally, he would be able to say goodbye to her for good. In the meantime, Alex and Jason were preparing to transport Emily's body to the funeral home. Beautiful woman she was, still young, Jason said, looking at Emily's face. So is her husband taking a lot of grief? What's on these rich people's minds? I don't know. First all shaking over his wife's body, now he wants to bury it. But what do I care? The main thing is he got the money. There's not much to do. I'm not used to this kind of thing. I've only been out for 4 months. I'm not going back. All right, don't worry, you'll be fine. We just gotta keep the cops off our backs. Look at her. She looks alive. That's kinda creepy, Alex laughed. Jason took a closer look at the dead woman. It's real, and her skin is soft. He poked a finger into her exposed shoulder and shuddered. That's the way I've never seen it, and I never will. Alex crossed himself. Flashing the voice of Paul appearing made the orderlies wince. Where are you taking her? And I haven't done an autopsy yet. Come on, guys. Get her over here. Alex and Jason looked at each other. That's not what we agreed to with Ryan, Jason said. So this, maybe he refused to do an autopsy. Says he has a funeral to arrange. Busy man, businessman. Paul frowned and walked out into the hallway. Immediately, he spoke to Ryan. I can't release your wife's body without an autopsy. In order for me to sign all the paperwork, I have to do the necessary procedures. What are they going to give you? To me, the situation is transparent. Emily died of a heart attack. I agree with that, and I don't require confirmation. I don't need any tests. Are they going to bring my spouse back to life? Ryan asked indignantly. He noted that Paul was a man of principle, so he wouldn't just neglect his professional duties and risk his reputation and career. Come closer, Ryan asked and reached into his pocket for his wallet. Is such a request satisfactory to you? He handed Paul all the bills he had left. He raised his eyebrows in surprise, not at all expecting this turn of events. He hastily accepted the money and stuffed it into his pants pocket so it wouldn't fall out. Looking around, he leaned over to Ryan. Well, that's a different conversation, he said in a soft, friendly tone. I would be more than happy to expedite the process of transferring your spouse's body, Ryan. Doing the autopsy is my responsibility. Fine, do your autopsy, Emily's husband snapped. But he immediately calmed down. Now he didn't have to worry about the morgue staff. He'd bribed everyone, and they couldn't report him to anyone, or they'd be out of a job. If the orderlies lost a little, Paul would lose his license. And if he decides to talk too much. Without wasting a minute, Paul got to work. Guys, you see the body? Let's do an autopsy, he commanded, looking at Alex and Jason. Only a few seconds separated Emily from the irreparable. Don't touch her. Don't touch that woman. They shouted suddenly across the hallway from some madman who had inexplicably found himself in the morgue. He was breathing heavily and holding his heart, trying to catch his breath. Who the hell is this weirdo? Jason stared at him. Standing before them was the usual grimy hobo in dirty clothes, gathered into one comfortable set from several dogs. It was hard to tell the age of the tired man with the beard and bushy eyebrows. Are you lost or something? Alex addressed him. Or are you having trouble with your head? Get out of here. This isn't a circus for you. That's my wife. Don't touch her. Call the police. And him. He pointed his finger with frantic eyes at Ryan, who froze in place as if struck by thunder. There's Andrew. Ryan couldn't even find the words to somehow shut the intruder up. Call me right now. What are you standing there for? You morons. What's all the noise? Paul stepped out into the hallway. He looked around sternly at everyone present. Is Emily here to see you? She's my wife. Don't cut her. Call the police. I'm begging you. Okay, Paul nodded and pulled off his clean gloves. He immediately threw Ryan an angry glare. If he'd only known what he'd offered him the money for, he never would have taken it. The police officers who arrived on the scene at first took Andrew for a lunatic. What do we have here? Drunken ramblings. Russell asked tiredly, looking at him. I'm neither drunk nor crazy. My name is Andrew Gulliver. And Emily, who was brought in this morning, is my wife, or rather Gulliver's ex-wife. The same one. Vincent aghast, trying to make out the missing businessman from 5 years ago in the scruffy tramp across the street. The same one. Andrew nodded. And this, he shifted his gaze to Ryan, who had arrived and was prevented from sneaking out before the police arrived. Alex, Jason, this is my former friend Ryan. I know everything about you now. I know your sneaky nature. No one expected Andrew to lunge at his former friend and punch him with his fist. As Ryan slammed into the wall and butted the back of his head, Vincent and Russell immediately grabbed Andrew under the arms, holding him in place. And I'm going to nail you with my own hands for you bastard. Andrew didn't stop lashing out. Ryan, do you hear that? Do you hear that? Shouted Ryan. This is a direct threat of reprisal. You're all witnesses. The bickering of the men was broken by a loud female scream. Everyone rushed to the section where a terrified Emily was sitting on the floor with her arms wrapped around herself. Emily. Andrew dropped down beside her, covering her with his jacket and pulling her close to him. My love, I'm here. I'm with you again. Emily was shaking. She was weak and scared. Several pairs of eyes stared at her in horror. Ryan turned the palest of them all. There you go. If you hadn't run in, she would have been properly scrutinized by now, Jason ahead. Realizing that Paul had almost performed an autopsy on a living person, Vincent looked around at those present. Doctor, examine the victim and sedate her. He pointed to Andrew. Will you come with me? I'll get the guys. Russell nodded to him. I'll stay here to keep an eye on the victim. I'm asking for the pathologist. On the way to the police station, Andrew was shaking. He couldn't believe what had happened to him in just a couple hours. Now his life was going to change. Things would go back to the way they were before. He still hoped he could get it all back. But what worried him most was Emily's fate. He loved her so much even though he hadn't been there for 5 years. How would she be without him? Could that pathologist be trusted? Andrew didn't relax when Vincent spoke to him. He got a mug of hot sweet tea and a good attitude. Tell me an order, Andrew, Vincent asked him. He sighed, closed his eyes a little, and spoke. Do you know who I am? 5 years ago, I was traveling to Oakville to negotiate with Ryan. We knew each other from university, studying economics together. We dreamed of owning our own business together, and we had the same views on doing business. I considered Ryan my friend. At those words, Andrew gripped the handle of his mug tightly, realizing how wrong he was. I knew him before I knew Emily. We used to vacation together a lot. Sometimes Ryan introduced us to his passions, but his relationships never lasted long. I want to emphasize that I trusted Ryan like a brother. I had no idea that he would betray me in such a way. Our meeting with potential companions in Oakville promised a lucrative partnership. Ryan and I, already anticipating a huge profit, were overjoyed. And we were the young sharks of business. We were role models for young people. Everyone dreamed of such a meteoric rise. Our firm developed surprisingly fast. When it first started, we couldn't have dreamed that it wouldn't be a year before we could afford to buy our own place. So on the way to Oakville, it was a 3-hour drive, but I ate a big meal before I got there. And Ryan started begging me to stop along the way and get something to eat at a restaurant. I didn't refuse, and I didn't suspect a thing. Even when the best restaurant Eichels turned out to be just a canteen with some suspicious types hanging around. They were on to us as soon as we got out of the car. Ryan was never short on words and could stoop to any level to prove his superiority. Before I knew it, I was in the center of a scuffle, but I was the only one getting hit. I didn't realize it was Ryan. He lured me to this camp where no one knew us by sight, hired some thugs, and got away with it. I was in a lot of trouble back then. I spent the night in the alley where I'd been beaten the night before. I woke up with a buzzing head and my mind was blank. I lost my memory, and from that moment on I didn't even know who I was. A group of vagabonds took me in and taught me how to survive. Together we roamed from one village to another until we stopped here. I didn't realize how close I was to my former life. At one time, I was an idol to the people of this town, and then I became invisible. So today I went to the store for tea and a cake, as I always did in the morning. Sometimes they'd let me eat right there and watch TV. That's how I found out about the news in the city and the world. Today there was a report about Emily's death. They said that millionaire Nesterov's wife had died of a heart attack right in the office of Ryan and Emily. Emily's picture was shown close up, and something clicked in my head. I screamed in pain. Her face stirred everything inside of me, the memory cells seeming to fill up one by one. The store clerk was startled when I burst into tears right there on the sales floor. My beloved Emily had died. I couldn't bear the thought, and then I felt inside that I needed to go to the city morgue. I needed to go to the city morgue. I don't know how to explain it. Call it a premonition if you want. But I wasn't wrong. I was sure she was there, that she was alive, that I'd make it in time. Senate and everyone watching Andrew's testimony were shocked. There was no doubt, even on the face of it, it was safe to say that the story had been told by a businessman who had disappeared 5 years ago. The story was incredible, even momentous. In one day, Andrew was not only able to remember himself, but also lost his wife and then saved her from death at the hands of a despicable friend traitor. Soon the whole town was buzzing about the incredible incident. The police remained silent, but journalists got wind of the sensation anyway. The news began to report on the miraculous return of the businessman and the true identity of his friend. By the time Andrew arrived at the hospital to talk to his beloved, Ryan had managed to escape. "I'm not staying here," he muttered. As soon as the police swarmed into the morgue, he looked threateningly at Jason and Alex for being caught up in an obscure scam. "If you blab, if you regret our case." His buddy, recently released from juvie, understood his point. They didn't know who they could be impertinent with, who they'd better not put sticks in their wheels. "Doctor, how is she?" Andrew was only concerned about the state of Emily, who was in no hurry to talk to anyone after what had happened. She gave Russell a statement and asked him not to bother her. After the dose of medication that was administered to the patient, her body has weakened, but the IVs will do their job. The other issue is the psychological state. Her mood is volatile now, so be prepared for tears or hysterics. It's not an easy situation from what I hear, the doctor advised Andrew. He entered the room and stood still for a moment. The same clear eyes of his now ex-wife looked at him open. "Emily, darling, I'm so sorry, I didn't even know." She turned away, unable to bear the gaze of the man she had betrayed. "I thought you were dead. You were gone. I was a wreck. Ryan was there for me. He helped me through my grief and get back on my feet. He was there for me when I couldn't see anyone else. I don't think you can forgive me. I won't forgive myself after this either." She covered her face with her hands. "What are you talking about?" Andrew sat down on the chair next to the bed. "You didn't know, did you? You didn't know how dishonest and devious he is. It's all a plan to eliminate both of us. You're just as much a victim as I am. But I married him. Not even a year after you disappeared, I married him." So rashly, Emily sobbed. Andrew just put his arm around her. "We'll get through this. We'll get through it all. If you still want to be with me, of course." The ex-spouse's home was surrounded by reporters and cameramen. Ryan didn't distinguish himself here either. He didn't even offer Emily a change of venue after her first husband went missing. Ryan simply took him out of the picture by taking possession of what he once owned. The firm the two young friends had started in the past was now owned by Ryan and Emily. "I need to get back to normal. I'm weaned on technology," Andrew warned his beloved. "Gotta catch up. The current specialist is much more knowledgeable about our field than I am." "It's okay, we'll live. The firm is still in place, everything works," Emily consoled him. "You remember I'm very capable." After Andrew's return, she went to work and involved him in the business. It saved her from the awkwardness of being with her ex-husband in the big quiet house. The past 5 years had changed both of them so much that now their relationship was going through a major crisis. They had breakfasted together, dined together, chatted politely, but did not broach the topics of concern. The police were relentlessly pursuing the sensational case, but Ryan seemed to vanish. He was elusive. He disappeared without leaving a trace. When the decision was made to freeze his accounts to make it harder for him to travel as far away as possible, or even to another country, the following came to light. Ryan had thought of several contingencies in advance and transferred all the funds from his account to an offshore account. The authorities had no access to it, which made finding Ryan much more difficult. Emily and Andrew, meanwhile, were living under the same roof as strangers. Each had their own burdens, but they were in no hurry to share them. Both of them were concerned about Ryan's fate. They dreamed of the moment when he would be caught and brought to justice for all his evil deeds. At times, the ex-spouses spent evenings together, watching movies, talking about detached topics, not touching on personal matters. They feared they wouldn't be able to catch up. I find it hard to believe that now we live as if we were strangers. Emily shared her worries over dinner one night. 5 years ago, we were newlyweds making plans, and then fate threw it all away for us. Can we get that back? For the first time in the few weeks of living with her, Andrew dared to take her hand without permission. My darling, just remember how it all started. Can't we do this anymore? Did everything inside of us die when I was a vagabond and didn't even remember you? I still longed for you. I was in a lot of pain without you, not physically, but being separated from you hit me hard. That evening, they spent time sitting in each other's arms. Andrew and Emily took their time. They did not want to scare away the trust in each other that had been rekindled between them. The former spouses recalled the moment they met. You then just graduated from the institute. Eyes burning in the hands of a red diploma, Andrew recalled with admiration. I even remember what you were wearing then. Yeah, they didn't want to take me anywhere, Emily replied. I did great during my internship. I was recommended to several firms, but none of them dared to hire me. I was counting on you so much back then. As a young company, your demands couldn't have been too high. When I saw you two lanky, budding entrepreneurs, startups for what? Andrew took offense with joking resentment. You should have seen yourself then, all important, even though you're only 2 years older than me, Emily laughed. I knew I had to wave my hair in front of you, flap my eyes. And when you saw me I never underestimated you, he declared. Sure, you impressed me with your looks, but without your knowledge, the firm wouldn't have become so successful, at least not as quickly. You've been a great help to us and you deserve the CEO position you now hold. Andrew had a tough time in his former position. He was once again a respected businessman who didn't need anything, but he realized how far behind the modern experts were. Without giving in to hubris, he took business courses that dealt with the latest trends in the world of business and social media. We have a whole department dedicated to this, Emily explained to Andrew with a satisfied look. 70% of purchases people make online. Oh, and the number of shoppers has increased due to shipping. Yes, things have changed. Andrew nodded without regret as Emily took him around the office. It's enviable that I wasn't involved in every new phase. I'd like to see you grow. But Andrew had plenty of reasons to be upset as well. The employees who worked at the company under Ryan and Emily had only heard about the once savvy Andrew. They learned more from the news when he was reported missing. The boss's ex-husband had miraculously returned. Everyone expected incredible solutions, new breakthrough ideas from him, but they were disappointed. Andrew, understand, these are people of a different generation. They're younger and tech-savvy, Emily told him. You can be angry all you want, but your courses are nothing if you refuse to put knowledge into practice. We got rid of the old methods a long time ago. You have to get over it. I know, Andrew admitted his mistakes. Even the junior staff look at me like I'm an ancient man. I'm trying to be someone you can count on. I want to do business wisely, but I need to get used to it. But it wasn't just the situation at Beloved's firm that worried Andrew. The results of Emily's blood tests, which were conducted to detect the presence of poison in her blood, made him nervous. Ever since his return, he had suspected that Emily was hiding something from him. Emily, I've had enough of this. I can't guess what's going on inside you anymore, he declared once right in the office. He didn't have the energy to wait until he got home. Emily had gone pale. It was clear she was caught off guard. What you're about to hear could knock you out. She warned and lowered her eyes. My blood results showed you didn't poison yourself, did you? They were clean. Andrew couldn't help himself and immediately apologized. No, that's not it. Anyway, I'm pregnant with Ryan's baby, naturally. I didn't know how to tell you that. Andrew was silent briefly, sighed, and spoke. He was your husband. You were planning a family? I have nothing to blame you for. The baby is in no way to blame, Andrew said confidently. He saw no reason at all to keep such wonderful news from him. I was afraid it would alienate you. We're very careful with each other as it is, and I'm so tired of living in constant tension. Then don't. It's not good for the baby. Andrew sat down on Emily's desk and put his arm around her. I'm not going anywhere else. No one's going to make me. And this baby is ours, no one else's. He wouldn't be happy with a father like Ryan himself. Emily couldn't hold back the tears. She had held in all the excitement for so long that it didn't take long for relief to set in. She and Andrew would be a family again. They would have a baby just like they had once dreamed. "I'll definitely have to get over my ambition now," Andrew said, rocking Emily in his arms. "I won't let you sit in the office so much. You'll be relaxing at home. There are all sorts of healthy goodies, but I won't lock you up to work remotely either, of course, but you've taken on too much." "The staff is relaxed. I recognize your grip now," laughed Emily, wiping away tears. The whole truth was known, and she was no longer afraid of being rejected. Andrew remained just as sensitive, caring, and attentive. "We're going to have a family. I wanted my baby so badly, and now we will have one. Thank you for hosting us." Over the next few months, Andrew never ceased to amaze Emily. He tempered his ego and began to adopt the experience of the new staff to fit in. Soon he was to take over the role of the head of the firm because Emily had to take care of her health. She, of course, filed for divorce, and the former spouses modestly signed after that in the registry office. At the time of Andrew's return, journalists did not stop following them on their heels, so the newlyweds acted cautiously. They hid Emily's pregnancy and hired bodyguards to drive away the reporters hanging around the house in search of another sensation. "Sooner or later, they'll figure it out and start trumpeting the baby," Emily reassured her husband. "Soon I won't be able to hide my tummy." "You're overreacting. It's how they earn their bread," she continued. "No, I think I'm going to have a 10-foot fence around the house soon," Andrew grumbled. He pretended he hadn't heard. He was annoyed at the intrusion of others into their lives. Besides, he didn't want Ryan, wherever he was, to find out about the baby. Andrew's only dream was to keep his family safe from outsiders. Next to him, Emily felt at ease. She began to trust Andrew more. The same tenderness that had driven them crazy a few years ago had appeared between them. "You've gotten too tense," she said, kneading her spouse's shoulders. "I don't know how you're coping. You've changed a lot, and that makes me happy." Andrew proudly accepted the praise from his wife's lips, putting the well-being of the family first. He found the strength to run the firm. In just 3 months, he had to absorb a lot of new information, to find an approach to the team and take some of Emily's worries away from her. Now she was much less likely to show up at the office, but she did conference calls with the staff via video link. And soon Andrew faced massive dissatisfaction from his subordinates. "Andrew, things are not going well at all. The complaints about reduced pay are increasing every day," his deputy reported. "I'm aware of the current situation. Ryan has let us down. Funding has been cut many times over. But employees have not received their due for months. Our market position is down. Everyone is working their hardest to move up, and they're not getting any incentives for it," Andrew replied. "Yes, I admit it. I've long preferred to ignore our real perspective," the latter agreed with his deputy. "That's why, Brian, we need to downsize. I can't afford that kind of staffing at the moment. LAPE approved the applications of those who wish to leave. We'll work with those who are committed, and I'll make sure they earn a decent wage. It's fairer that way." Emily supported her husband as best she could. She hoped the police would find Ryan and bring him to justice. After all, he had absconded with money that didn't just belong to him. But as the months passed, there was no decisive news from law enforcement. Andrew returned home, increasingly irritable. The only thing that could calm him down was the developing son in Emily's belly. She, on the other hand, was tireless. She didn't want to quit her job and would often linger over her laptop, until her husband came home from work and told her, "Honey, the baby will be here soon, and you so-and-so will not get away from the screen." He said. "Oh, come on. I'm a businesswoman after all," she replied. It was as if Andrew had predicted the birth of little Peter. The baby had expressed a desire to be born that very night. Emily felt in bed that the sheet beneath her was wet. "Andrew," with panic in her voice, she shoved her husband. "Andrew, wake up." "I think it started." An agitated Emily was brought to the birthing center by ambulance. Andrew was so worried that he was afraid to drive himself. The thought of the agony his wife was about to go through was unnerving. "Please sign." He hurried the paramedic as he and his partner loaded his wife onto the gurney. "Andrew, don't talk under your arm. They know what to do," she said. Andrew was measuring the hallway of the maternity ward with his steps. He couldn't understand why Emily was so much calmer than he was. It was scary to imagine what it was really like for her. She must have prepared herself for labor. After all, she often repeated how she wanted to get rid of the annoying belly as soon as possible. An exhausted Emily fell into a blissful sleep when she was moved to a separate room where all the babies were kept. In the morning, when it was time for her son's feeding, the young mother was in for another shock. "I mean, how? What do you mean, Peter? Not there." She didn't understand the first time, looking demandingly at the nursing staff. "What do you mean you lost my baby? Are you out of your mind? That's impossible." Andrew rushed to the maternity hospital as soon as he received the alarming call from his wife. The police also arrived on the scene immediately. The obstetricians ran around the ward but couldn't find the missing baby. "So Tara, who worked here on the night shift, is missing," Vincent clarified, questioning the entire staff. "Find him now," Emily yelled at everyone. She didn't fall into despair, but instead brought the entire maternity ward to its feet so they wouldn't sit still. "I'm going to sue every last one of you." "Honey, you need to calm down. You're still too weak." Andrew tried to put her to bed, but his spouse refused to stand idly by. He used all of his connections to enlist the necessary forces to find the newborn. Tara's not at home. Neighbors said they didn't see her this morning or hear the baby crying. Russell shared with his partner. "She has a cabin in Riverside. Inherited it from her grandfather. Did you know?" replied Tara's co-worker Ellen, who had been called into work to replace a runaway employee. "We'll leave immediately," Vincent nodded to Russell. "We'll get the address on the way. We need to find out about her loved ones. Who was she seeing? Maybe this guy went somewhere and stole a baby without thinking of the consequences. Or he planned it all a long time ago," Russell said grimly, which was absolutely no consolation to Andrew and Emily. Tara didn't hear when 2 police cars pulled up to her wooden house. She was preoccupied with a screaming Peter who wouldn't eat the formula despite being terribly hungry. "Yes, hush, hush. We need to be patient for a little while." Tara rocked him in her tired arms. "He will come for you soon. You have not been abandoned, don't be afraid." "Tara Woods, leave the house immediately with the baby," came a stern male voice into the mouthpiece. Tara knew she had no escape route. Oh, and her accomplice hadn't shown up yet. She should have trusted him so much. "Tara, I repeat, come out with the baby." "Relieve yourself now," Russell's voice urged her. Tara wrapped Peter in a small blanket and opened the front door, putting one hand out in front of her. "I'm unarmed," she shouted. One of the operatives immediately ran up to Tara and took Peter away. Emily hadn't done anything to him. She wasn't going to. She was forced to put her hands behind her back to be handcuffed, she said through tears. After calming down, Tara laid it all out at the police station, not holding back a single detail. "Ryan Michaels, my lover. We've been together for over a year. I knew he was married, but he said the passion between them was long gone, that they lived as strangers." "But you told me yourself, Tara. Were you planning to kidnap a child to raise together?" the investigator asked. "Yes. No, I don't know." Ryan freaked out when he found out Emily was pregnant, even though she got back together with her ex-husband. Ryan had calculated everything. The baby's definitely his. He's got a lot of contacts around town and debtors. Knew when Emily's pregnancy was established. He never wanted kids. At least he didn't discuss it with. I thought it was too early to plan a family, so I didn't ask. And Ryan always seemed like a free spirit to me. I was even surprised he was so caught up in the idea of taking the baby for himself, and I couldn't help but help him. He always had a knack for persuasion, Tara admitted to her shame. He's the kind of man who knows how to find the right words to get his way. It's always happened to me. And now it's going to be a lesson to me. Am I looking at jail time? If you tell us his exact whereabouts, you might get probation. Russell looked at Tara carefully. "I don't know where he's gone. Believe me, I'm not covering for him. Ryan always does what he wants and doesn't answer to anyone. He's got some business of his own, maybe illegal. And he always told me it was best not to get involved." Emily was ready to strangle Tara with her own hands, the one who had put their son in danger. "When you find this scoundrel, he'll answer for everything," she told Vincent, who returned the baby to her and told her about the midwife's role in the case. "He won't get away with it, that's for sure. You can be sure of that. For double attempted murder, grand larceny, various tax frauds, and stealing the baby. He's going away for a long time." "Thank you," Andrew shook the policeman's hand. "And please find him as soon as possible. We'd like to know our boy is safe." No matter how hard the police officers tried, The surveillance of Tara's village home had no success. Ryan had likely seen the police cars and the commotion that had engulfed the village, so he didn't even go near the place where he hoped to meet his kidnapped son. We were to locate Ryan's account, Russell informed them. It was frozen, so now he can't use it no matter how hard he tries. And we know he's in our area, and the lack of money will prevent him from hiding well and traveling freely. Thank you. Please keep us informed, Emily replied. She felt more comfortable with both personal guards and police patrols on duty outside their home for safety. When are we going to have a quiet life? Emily sighed, looking at her son. I won't let you get hurt for anything. We won't. Andrew touched his finger to the little nose and kissed his wife. Be that as it may, and we need to get on with our lives and raise our merit. Andrew continued to drive to the office every day, but often called home and asked Emily to show him her son. Congratulations, shouted his staff at the firm. May your baby grow up healthy to the delight of his parents. And this is to your family from us. Jessica, who kept the office clean, held out a basket of various baby products to the director. Thank you so much, friends. This is new to us, so don't be surprised if I come in even more tired than before. The co-workers dispersed to their seats. Andrew made a few calls to organize a small banquet during lunch and treat his subordinates to Peter's birthday party. But a few days later, the irreparable happened. Andrew was sure he was among the last to leave the office. He saw Jessica on the way, finishing cleaning up the last rooms. See you tomorrow, Andrew, she said with a smile as she passed by. See you tomorrow, Jessica. He didn't bother to set the alarm. He knew the cleaning lady would take care of that when she was done. He had only had time to drive away from work for a few minutes when he got the call about the fire. No way. No, he should, and called the fire department. He was the first one outside the company building and ran inside. Andrew was sure Jessica hadn't left yet, and the building was already on fire. Jessica, Andrew shouted, call out. We need to get out now. The whole place is on fire. Jessica, where are you? But the girl didn't respond. She had lost consciousness because she was too close to the utility room where the fire had occurred. Andrew did not waste his strength to put out the fire, although the thought that he might lose the building in the fire prevented him from thinking soberly. Jessica was saved at the cost of the burns on Andrew's face. He felt no pain due to shock, but Emily, who arrived at the scene of the fire, screamed when she saw his burned face and there were burns on Andrew's body as well, but they could at least be hidden under his clothes. After being hospitalized and discharged from the hospital, Andrew became despondent. He couldn't look at his disfigured face and didn't want to show his son his face. He shouldn't see me like this. I'm scaring him. He fumbled with Peter when Emily wanted to give him the baby. Honey, don't say that. He feels like you're his daddy and he needs you. Please don't push him away. But Andrew was hard to argue with. Having lost his office in the fire, he didn't know what to do next, and his life was failing again. He had missed out on his life's work when things were just starting to get better again. We'll try again, Emily reassured him, stroking his hair. We're both experts, after all. Except we don't have the money. We can't spend all our savings on starting from scratch. We have a child. We can't jeopardize his future. We have to think straight and live within our means. Andrew had to use a mask to appear in public. His appearance aroused morbid curiosity in others, and some even shouted or turned away with a look of dislike on their faces. Andrew managed to get a job in the office of a large company and worked hard for several months to prove his professionalism. He was now a rank-and-file employee, not a manager. Together with Emily, they loved spending time with their son, tried to devote every free minute to him. But Peter's mother did not stay at home for long and gave him to kindergarten. Emily also got a job. Andrew no longer neglected his child and eventually came to terms with the way he looked. Peter adored his parents, always reaching out to them. The 3-year-old was inquisitive and made friends easily at daycare. Jessica invited us to visit, Emily informed her husband. After Andrew rescued his former employees, she kept coming over to thank them, and sometimes babysat Peter when both his parents were busy with work. I'm glad she met a decent man, and now she's a mom herself. You and she have become great friends. Andrew smiled contentedly. You treat her like a little sister? You could say we're kin now. After all, events like this bring us closer together, replied Emily. As the years went by, with each of Peter's birthdays, Andrew and Emily wondered where time flew so quickly. "You're a schoolboy now," Emily cried after her son's first lineup, squatting down in front of him. "You've gotten so big." "Mom, don't cry." Peter wiped her tears with his warm palms. "There's a lot to be happy about. I'm going to grow up soon. I'll start earning a lot of money so I can get Daddy's surgery. I mean, he's embarrassed about his scars." "Oh, you, my attentive boy." His mother hugged him. Unfortunately, the amiable Peter became the subject of bullying by the children at school. They saw Andrew, who always walked the streets with his head down and covered by the collar of his coat or jacket. "Your dad's a freak. Your dad's your freak," the bullies teased Peter. "My parents call him Quasimodo," another silly boy chuckled. "Don't call him that." "My dad isn't scary," Peter defended his father. He could barely hold back tears of resentment. But his frustration only served to irritate the little bullies. "I'm going to go to school and make all parents ashamed of raising their children." Andrew raged when he learned that his son was being teased again because of his scars. "Don't they have any shame? Don't they know the pain they're causing him?" "We should go together," Emily suggested. "If neither the head teacher nor the class teacher will do anything about it, we'll find other ways. I'm sick of seeing my son in tears all the time, too." "It's all my fault." Andrew sat down on the couch, wrapping his arms around his head. He thought it was his fault that Peter was being bullied at school. "Don't you dare even think that," Emily declared. "We need to get all the parents together with the kids to explain to them how you got those scars. Let them know that Papa Peter is a hero, that he sacrificed his business, his health, and his looks to save another man's life. But who among them would go to such lengths? My guess is not many." "No need to make a hero a laughingstock," Andrew immediately retorted. The burns he had received had made him an even more humble man. More often than not, he wanted to be the most inconspicuous man in society, but Emily knew how honorable, honest, and decent her husband was. "Why should you, Peter, suffer for these ignoramuses?" "No, I won't let them bully you," she persisted. Emily still insisted, and in front of the whole class, she reprimanded the very bullies who were mocking her family. But the effect of her fiery speech was short-lived. Now the troublemakers tried not to taunt Peter on school grounds, but harassed him on the bus on the way home. Her son of Quasimodo, Elia, who was sitting 2 seats away, said loudly, "Hey, you freak, I'm addressing you." "Leave me alone," Peter responded angrily. "So he's hiding behind Mom's skirt. And Dad didn't even show up for school," said the other bully, and they both laughed. Peter sat there burning with shame. He realized that the adult passengers had heard everything, but no one even thought of standing up for him. At the next stop, when most of the people got off, Eli and Artur sat closer to Peter and started shoving him in the shoulder. "Well, where's your hero, Daddy? What's he not protecting you?" The driver, who could now hear the mocking talk of the first graders, could not stand their insolence, and at the next stop made his way into the cabin. "What are you kids bothering a kid for? Do I have to drop you off at full throttle?" His voice sounded menacing, so Peter's assailants immediately fell silent. "How can you threaten other people's children?" An elderly female passenger raised her voice. "You better ask why their parents don't educate them." Arthur and Ilya jumped out into the street, unwilling to listen to the moralizing. Peter exhaled with relief. "All right." The driver asked him. "Yeah, fine," Peter replied softly. "Thank you very much. They're always picking on me." "Then get in the front seat. We'll chat." The man waved at him, returning to his seat. "What's your name?" "I'm Peter." "Michaels," the man replied without a backward glance. "You're Michaels. What's your mom's name?" The driver's voice changed. "Emily, do you know her?" Peter did notice that the bus driver had gone silent due to his attempts to suppress unsolicited tears. After all, he didn't just know Peter's mother, he was his own father. Ryan had been leading the life of an ordinary man for several years now, but not because all his funds had been frozen by the police. The reason was different. The birth of his son had changed him. He clearly realized that Andrew would be a better father to the boy than he, and his final act of revenge was the firm that the former friends had started together many years ago. In that moment, after learning that he almost took Andrew and Jessica's lives with his own hands, Ryan realized how low he'd sunk. He was scared of himself. He was now a lying, vindictive, selfish father. Could such a man be responsible for someone? Be a role model? Ryan was shocked to meet his son because he wanted to lay low and never be seen by him. Let Peter grow up with loving parents who could give him a good upbringing. But now Ryan realized that he had seen Peter before, that the boy was always coming home by this route. "Uncle, are you all right?" inquired the kid when it was his turn to get off. He put the map to the machine and looked at the adult carefully. "Yeah, kid, don't worry. My allergies are acting up. That's what the tears are about. Take care of yourself. Don't let yourself get hurt." Ryan dared to ruffle his son's hair. In that moment, he experienced such tender feelings as he had never experienced before. Peter walked off the bus with a smile, leaving a completely lost Ryan behind. No more bullies harassed Peter on the bus. They had picked on him less often at school, choosing a new harmless target for their constant bullying. Now Peter came home from school in high spirits. He really liked the driver he had befriended. Upon entering the bus, the boy would immediately stop beside Ryan. They had a soft conversation. "You have very nice drawings. Your winning the contest is well deserved," he praised his son. "I used to love to draw when I was a kid too. It's been a long time since I tried it. It's a lot of fun." Peter nodded with a smile. "Starting next year, I'm also going swimming." The friendship between Peter and Ryan had taken on a life of its own. His father enjoyed every second he spent with his son and was glad no one teased him anymore. Peter complained to him about why he was being picked on. "Mom says it's nasty," Peter said candidly. "My dad pulled a man out of a fire. Can you imagine? He didn't wait for the fire department. He went into the flames himself. That's why he's scarred." Ryan was pained to hear that Peter and his family had suffered because of his terrible act. He often wanted to repent to his son, to tell him that it had ruined his dad and mom's lives for years, but he couldn't take it out on a child. And if he confessed, Peter would hate him and they would never see each other again. "So you made friends with the bus driver?" Emily inquired of her son. "Yeah, he's really nice. Standing up for me in front of Arthur and Elijah," Peter happily shared. "I'll show him to you now." He reached into the phone's gallery. "I took a video of him driving the bus." Emily ached and nearly let go of her son's phone. She could clearly see her ex-husband. Panic gripped her. Ryan had gotten close to Peter. God knows what he was up to. "Jesus, son," she shrieked. "Honey, what are you doing?" Andrew peered over her shoulder and froze. "Peter, is this your friend?" "Yes," the son said wearily. He didn't understand why Dad and Mom were so tense. "Let's go to the police." "Now," Emily said in her husband's ear. "I'm not going to let him anywhere near here. He's definitely up to something." Andrew nodded excitedly. The police worked swiftly and arrested Ryan. His meeting with Andrew and Emily that same evening took place in the hallway of the squad room. "Forget about Peter. You'll never see him again, asshole." Andrew grabbed him by his jacket and shook him. "I admit everything. Just let us communicate," Ryan pleaded. The couple glanced over, and their mutual enemy visibly changed. His appearance spoke eloquently of the crime he had committed. "Peter is the only good thing I have left. I'm happy he's mine, as long as he wants to communicate with you himself," Emily said firmly. Even though she and Andrew hated Ryan with all their hearts, they weren't going to lie to Peter because he had already grown attached to his own father. Ryan's trial was months away, as the lawyer had to work hard to build a defense for several violent crimes at once. Peter sauntered into the courtroom with his parents. "Are you sure?" Emily worried. She and Andrew had agreed that they wouldn't turn their son against Ryan. He'd be spending at least 20 years behind bars anyway. "Yes, Ryan's uncle will be charged, but he's got to have at least one family member." As expected, Ryan was sentenced to 17 years. Andrew felt the sentence was too short to cover the atrocities he had calculatedly committed. Peter cried when Ryan looked at him after the verdict was announced. The man waved at his son but couldn't portray a carefree smile. "Don't be afraid, son." Emily cradled him to her side and stroked his cheek. "You'll be able to write him letters. Maybe I'll see you when you're older too," Andrew whispered. The couple knew Peter distinguished between bad and good deeds, and didn't want to shame him for wanting to keep in touch with his birth father. After the trial, Ryan's account was frozen, and the money belonging to Andrew and Emily returned to the family. They were back in control of their income. "Well, we can finally let you have your surgeries." Emily rushed over to her spouse and kissed him. "Oh my God, won't I ever feel those looks again?" Andrew exhaled, still unable to believe his happiness. It took a few treatments to make his face and body look almost the same as before. "You look different." Emily eyed her husband curiously. "You have a new spouse now." The man laughed and hugged her. "Daddy, and I love you." "Love you," Peter added and joined his parents' hug. "It doesn't matter to me at all. They are from the business world." After almost 8 years, the couple realized they could no longer keep up and decided to invest in new business, to do business for their own pleasure. They weren't chasing any heights. "Emily, why don't we go into furniture? My father made everything with his own hands. I used to help him in the workshop a lot, and I was pretty good at it. Before Ryan and I started the business, I even worked in a furniture factory and learned a few things. And then maybe we'll start our own company. We'll make exclusive custom furniture." "No, that's an interesting idea." Emily nodded. "We just need to do a little more research and try it out. As long as we haven't invested anywhere, we can do different things and make up our minds." The couple decided to stop on furniture production, rented a room, bought equipment they learned themselves, and hired experienced craftsmen. Social networks did their job. And soon Emily and Andrew took orders from the first customers. Reviews about their developing enterprise left flattering. Orders began to arrive regularly. "I've been thinking of a few ways to attract customers." "I think we deserve a vacation," Emily once said, collapsing on the living room couch. "Me too," Peter shouted, plopping down next to his mom. "I got straight A's." "Well, then I'll have to take my workers to the sea," Andrew laughed. "I didn't do anything myself." The family went on vacation together with Jessica's family. The company stayed in luxurious rooms, and in the evening they lounged on the beach in the cool seawater. They went on excursions, tried out sea attractions, and even dived with scuba diving. "Your boy. So talented and hardworking," Emily smiled at her friend. "Yes, I married well," Jessica laughed. "I used to scrub floors in the office. Now I can afford a vacation at a resort like this." A week of vacation, which both families enjoyed, added to their strength and brought some surprises. Emily felt sick in the workshop when one of the craftsmen was heating up lunch in the microwave. "Oh my God, what was that horrible smell?" Emily clamped her hands over her mouth, realizing she was going to vomit. "Emily, are you all right?" Sarah, the foreman, who was waiting for her by the restroom, approached her. "I don't know what to say," Emily said, and rushed back into the stall. When she came back a couple minutes later, she said, "I remember how my first pregnancy started. I guess this is it." "Well, congratulations." Sarah brightened up, hugging her gently. "Thank you. But we have to be sure. Just please don't tell anyone. I want Andrew to be the first to know." "Well, almost first," Emily said quietly to her husband after hearing the exciting news. He looked at her with delight. "Are you a clever girl?" He leaned down to her tummy and kissed through her shirt. "Andrew, I'm almost 40. Do you think we can make it?" Emily asked fearfully. "We will, my dear, we will." He hugged her gently, feeling like the happiest man in the world. "Larry, hi." Wait, she heard a shout from behind her. She looked back and Vincent was running after her. He lived here too, so they knew each other. She waited for him, and when he caught up with her, he walked beside her. "Where are you from?" wondered the girl. "What are you doing out so late?" "It's already dark here," he asked her. "I'll do what I want for you," she said proudly, and walked on. Vincent had been following her all this time. He just liked the girl and wanted to walk her home. When her house came into view, Vincent took her hand, turned her around, and looked into her eyes. "Larry, how can you not realize that I love you?" he mumbled to her. "Oh, leave me alone. Soon I'll finish school, go to the city, and find a good fiancé. He'll have an apartment, a car, money, and he'll take me on vacations to the sea," Larry said dreamily. "Is it because I don't have money that I'm worse?" Vincent asked her. "I'm not saying who is worse or better. I'm just saying that I don't want to marry a country boy. I'll go to the city, and then I'll have everything." The girl looked at him and didn't want to talk anymore. "So does that mean it's over?" he asked her. "Did we have a beginning?" She didn't understand. "You've always been good to me, We used to dance at discos. At school, we talked a lot. I thought you liked me. That's why I was running, Vincent told her. What were you thinking? Larry didn't understand. She liked him, yes, but just as a friend. She could go anywhere with him, knew he'd stand up for her, but she'd never planned for him to think they were together. Vincent tilted his head. He didn't want to talk to the girl anymore. He'd really thought she liked him, but it turned out she had other plans. To go into town, to meet some rich daddy, and maybe stay there with him. He didn't even look at her, just turned around and walked away. Bye, Vincent, she said after him. But the young man didn't even look back. He walked on, tears dripping from his eyes. He couldn't let anyone look at someone like him right now. Vincent just wanted to go home, lie on his bed, and do nothing else. Larry stood there for a moment. She shrugged her shoulders, turned toward her house, and walked there quickly. Larry, where are you walking? Her mother asked as she entered the house. Mom, I'm an adult. Stop lecturing me, Larry said, and went to her room. She's grown up, of course. As soon as she asks for money. So Mommy give it, Daddy give it, and as soon as she's been somewhere else, she's grown up, said the woman, resenting the way her daughter was talking to her. But no one could do anything. And so everyone kept silent. Mom knew that if she started being rude to Larry now, they'd have a fight, and then the girl would just pack up and leave. And no one wanted that. So they all went to bed. In the morning, it would be a different conversation. Larry was going to school. She went there every day. The girl didn't study very well, but she did well, and that pleased her parents. Now, when she was going to enroll, her mother told her more than once that she had to study to get a good score. But Larry didn't care about that. Well, if her daughter didn't need it, her mother didn't need her to go to school, because she could count, write, read, what else was needed for a child. And when the exams were over, the boys stood in the yard. They were preparing to receive their certificates. The next day they had to go to the city to submit their documents. Larry dreamed of entering the institute to study economics. She had all the potential for it. She always got good grades in math. And now she and her mom were on the bus to the train station. Larry, are you sure you've chosen the profession you want? Her mother asked her. Of course, I've been coming to this for a long time. And I'm not going to give up on the idea now, Larry said. Her mother was not against it, although they were entering college, but it was a good one, so the woman had no doubt that her daughter would graduate from this educational institution and later become a good specialist. They arrived. The admission committee filled out all the documents. Luda was left here because she had to take some preparatory courses to know better what would be on the exams. The girl immediately fluffed up her tail, because she came here not only to enroll, but also to find a man with whom she could build a future life. But as they say, you can't escape fate, and Larry saw her acquaintance in a cafe on the third day. Vincent, hi, what are you doing here? She came up to him. Probably the same thing you did, coming to enroll, he told her. Vincent was still resentful inside for what Larry had said to him back in the village. It was obvious that he didn't want to talk to her. Well, are you still upset with me? She didn't understand. No, I'm not offended. It's just that I opened my soul to you and you spit in it, he told her. Listen, where did you go to school? Larry asked him, just curious. Law school, he looked at her. Oh, I remember you always wanted to do that, Larry told him. Then she sat down at his table, because she couldn't sit here alone, and called the waiter over to her. He took her order. Now Larry sat silently, looking at Vincent and waiting for her order to arrive. She felt so happy, but she realized that she would have to go back to the village after she got here to bring her things back. They sat there for a few hours today, and then Vincent started talking to Larry. They discussed many things, and it seemed to her that maybe she would start dating Vova, because he said he liked her. In the evening, the young man walked the girl to the dormitory, and then they met more than once. Larry, are we going out tonight? Vincent asked her when he came to her again. Well, let's go, the girl agreed. If before she didn't want to communicate with him, now, in another city, she was even somehow proud of the fact that she was dating a guy, and no one else had time to get acquainted with anyone. Vincent had some money, so he took the girl to cafes, movie theaters, and other places. That flattered Larry. She wondered why she hadn't paid any attention to him in the village. It wasn't so bad now that they were students. Vincent came over, gave her gifts. The girls were jealous of Larry, and she was better for it. One day, when she was graduating from college, Vincent asked her to marry him. "Will you marry me?" He looked at her. Of course, they held hands. The very next day, Vincent and Larry went to the registry office and filed the application. "I don't understand why I didn't want to hang out with you before," the girl said. "And I don't understand it either. I'm promising, I'm studying, I'll graduate soon, I'll have a profession," he said, and shrugged. Larry was glad of that, because she knew that if Vincent decided to do something, he would do it. "My parents were informed, and they insisted on registering at the city registry office, and then coming to the village and celebrating the wedding there. After all, it was in the village that all the acquaintances, friends, and relatives lived." The young people did not argue, because there was a lot of fun, and after they said yes at the registry office, took the marriage certificate and went to the village. The parents had done a great job. They had set up tables right outside, a lot of guests had come, and now Vincent and Larry were sitting at the head of the table, and they were very happy. Well, young people, bitter. One of the guests stood up and raised his glass. The young people kissed. Everything was fine. "Larry, what have you decided about where you're going to live after the wedding?" her mom asked her tonight. Of course, in the city. Where else? Vincent still had 2 more years of school. "We'll get an apartment and live there," Larry told her, because she didn't see any other options. "Good, I am happy for you. If you need money, just ask, and my father and I will definitely help you," said the mother, and hugged her daughter. Larry was glad to hear this, for she had no job yet, and Vincent had only a scholarship, and that was just an ordinary one. After a week in the village, they went to the city. Larry had to look for a job, and Vincent was not idle. He decided that his studies were taking up a lot of his time, but he had to get a job. Larry had no trouble getting a job in the education department, in the economics department. At first, she was just an intern. She was put on probation, and then she became like everyone else. She closed out statements, did payroll, and other things. Vincent went back to school in September. He couldn't find a job except at a cafe where he'd been offered a job as a waiter. But Larry urged him to take it, because every penny counted. Vincent didn't refuse, and as winter approached, he went to work. It was a penniless salary, hers and his, but it was enough to pay the rent and buy a month's worth of groceries. "We'll be fine," Larry told him, and hugged him. Everything was really fine in the family until the girl felt sick. "What is the matter with you?" Vincent looked at his wife and saw how pale she was. "Vince, I think you're going to be a daddy soon," the girl looked at him playfully. "Okay, Daddy, so Daddy, I'm very happy about it," he said. After that, the girl really found out that she was pregnant. And it began constantly in the morning: nausea, backache, it was impossible to walk. She barely made it to her maternity leave, and when she went into it, she just laid down on the DVJ and didn't get up. "Why are you always lying on the bed?" her husband used to say to her. He was just annoyed by it. "Try it, walk," she told him in return. But Vincent didn't care about that. He was in his last year, and now he had to prepare not only for the session, but also for his final exams and to write his diploma. He had to quit his job because he didn't have enough time for everything. And now there was practically no money in the family. I had to constantly call my parents for help. Finally, the long-awaited day came when Larry was due to give birth. It had been a long and slow process. The pain that overcame the girl was unrelenting. Larry screamed, the doctors soothed, but it had to be done. Finally, when everyone heard the baby scream, Larry exhaled and realized that she would never give birth again. "Congratulations on your baby, girl." A midwife came up to her with packages in her hands. "Let me see her," said Larry. And when the girl was placed beside her, she couldn't be glad that the little lump she had just given birth to was lying next to her. Both mother and child were doing well. Vincent came to pick them up a few days later. After that, they registered the baby. And now Larry's life was even more complicated than it had been before. The formula, the diapers, all of it was a struggle. Vincent didn't help because he was always busy, even though Larry asked him to. It was like a black cat had come between husband and wife. They started fighting all the time, but by the time Evie had to go to kindergarten and Larry had to go to work, things seemed to have settled down. Things went back to normal between the couple, but it didn't last long. "Can you take Evie to daycare today?" Larry asked her husband. "Why, you're going to work anyway," he told her. You understand, she wanted to tell him that she had to get ready, iron everything, do her hair, wash her hair. But she didn't say any of that, because she saw that he wouldn't take anyone to kindergarten. Then Larry would dress the girl and they would go. Vincent delved deeper into the fact that he was looking for a job. Every day he went somewhere, made phone calls, put on suits, went for interviews, but nothing worked out. Somewhere they wouldn't hire just because he didn't have experience and seniority. There the pay was small, there only as an intern. Well, what did you want? That you'd come in and they'd tell you right away, would you like to be a judge or a prosecutor? Larry used to tell him. It seemed to Vincent now that she was no longer the Larry he'd once loved. She'd been so jaded over the years that she'd gone from a beautiful girl to a gem. It was only going to get worse from here. Vincent got a job somewhere, a law firm. He did as he was told. Of course, he didn't like anything, but he put up with it, walking around, thinking he'd be promoted soon. "Why did you take the job here?" "Because there were plenty of offers just like it." Larry asked him. "Look, don't distract me, please," he told her as he sat at his desk, going through some papers. Okay, his wife pulled away from him. She realized that their relationship was not working out at all lately, so she made the only decision that seemed right to her now, which was to divorce him. When Evie was in second grade, Larry first talked about divorce. She didn't want to change anything, but she had no other choice. So she told Vincent that they had to get a divorce. He looked at her perplexed at first, then got up from the table and walked silently into the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water, drank it, and turned to Larry again. "Are you sure you mean what you say?" he asked her. "Absolutely," she answered him. "Okay, then go apply tomorrow. I don't think there'll be any problems. We have no assets in common. The daughter, I understand, will stay with you," and everything else. He grinned, looked around, and realized that there was nothing else. Just as Vincent had said, the next day Larry filed for divorce. She didn't want to live like that anymore. She didn't get much, but she and her daughter would have enough for the two of them. Vincent didn't wait for the divorce to go through. He packed up his things and went wherever the hell he wanted to go. "And that you won't even regret the job you worked?" his wife asked him as he packed his things. "I've been working there for several years now. I work like a horse, but I don't get anything out of it," he told her. "I've been working there for a few years now. I work like a horse, but I get nothing," he told her. He threw down his bag, looked at his wife again, hugged his daughter, and left the apartment. The first thing he did was to go to the train station. He had to see if there were tickets, where they were going, and what he would do where he would go. There were very few tickets. And when the woman cashier told him that there were several tickets to one of the cities he had once dreamed of, Vincent did not hesitate to buy one of those all tickets. Now he sat in the compartment, looking out the window and mentally saying goodbye to this city, realizing that he would never come back here again. His mother and father were waiting for him at home, but he decided not to go to them. He called to say he was fine. They divorced Larry, but the daughter also did not stop communicating with him, her grandmother and grandfather. And when Evie asked her mom at home where her dad was, her mom told her that he had died. "What do you mean, he's dead?" The girl didn't understand. "Well, just like that, when a person is gone and will never be again," her mother used to explain to her. Evie didn't understand it, because one buries the dead, and she hadn't buried her father. From that moment on, Larry began a life of debauchery. She had set herself a plan to find a husband to provide for her and her daughter, and now she had to fulfill that plan. She went to work, bought herself different outfits, was very showy, constantly wearing makeup, styling her hair, bringing home different men. Evie saw it all. She didn't like it at first. But when she was in the 6th grade, she looked up to her mother and started doing things too. At first, the girl got into a bad company, where her friend brought her. The guys that were older than the girls by several years, they could do there what was forbidden: smoking, drinking, kissing. But when the girl came home, no one controlled her there. She could go to her room without hindrance and go to bed. The mother noticed that something was wrong with her daughter, but did not say anything to her, because she really did not catch her daughter by the hand. and that's all Evie wanted. In 8th grade, the girl went wild. The first time Evie had close contact with a young man. She didn't say that she was very upset, but she wasn't happy either. She just didn't understand what the big deal was. The girl returned home. She went to bed. At night, she dreamed about some murk. Everything was scary. Everything was black all around. Some blood, something else. She didn't understand what the dream meant. She woke up in the morning. Her mother still wasn't home. It didn't really stress the girl out because she knew that her mom might not come through, and for 2 days she would be late at work. She would go somewhere on those days, and now that Evie realized that she was doing whatever she wanted with impunity. Sometimes her mother came and said something to her, read some lectures, but Evie didn't want to listen to her because first of all it was late and secondly it wasn't interesting. And what was the point of all these lectures if she could see a living example in front of her? Over the years her father might have called her, but her mother didn't pick up the phone, so the girl thought Vincent didn't communicate with her. She never believed he was dead. The girl did not say anything to anyone. She was fine, but this is at first glance. But if the girl was shown to a psychologist, he would certainly say that a child in the 8th grade would not drink and smoke. In any case, he pours out some of his unhappiness or grief. Of course, no one could tell Larry that, so she didn't think it was a good thing, but she didn't say anything. One day the daughter came home and immediately went into her mother's room. "I need to talk to you," she told her. "All right, come on in and we'll talk," Larry agreed. She was sitting there painting her nails. "Mom, I think I'm expecting a baby," her daughter told her. "What makes you think that?" She was staring at her. "Well, first of all, I'm 2 months late. Secondly, I'm nauseous and all the signs that I'm pregnant," the girl told her. The mother quickly called someone. They went to the hospital, even though it was already evening, but no one refused them because everyone knew each other. And after the girl was checked, it turned out that she was indeed expecting a child. And she already had not 1, and not even 2 months. "Okay, don't make any plans," Larry told her. "Why?" The girl didn't understand. "We'll probably have an abortion for you in a couple of days," she said, while she wondered how it could have happened. Then she grinned to herself and realized that with her lifestyle, anything could have happened without anyone noticing. Larry's eyes were on her daughter now, watching her all the time, watching what she was doing and how she was doing it. So when a few days had passed, she told Evie that they had to go to the hospital. The time was set for later, so that no one would know about anything and the girls would get there. "Mom, why at night?" her daughter asked her. "Do you have any idea why at night?" she asked her. They came in, Evie was put in a special chair, anesthesia was put in, and everything was done. And after she came to, the girl just cried. "Why are you crying now? You should have cried earlier," her mother told her. "Mom, don't you think you did a bad thing?" Evie told her she realized she had done it all herself, of course, but she didn't want to blame herself. "Don't you think you did the deed? I offered it to you. You didn't refuse. That was the end of it. They never brought up the subject again." But from that moment on, Evie became very distant from her mother. If earlier she wanted to finish 11 grades and then go somewhere else, now she had definitely decided that now, when 9th grade was coming to an end, she would not go any further. Evie had even already chosen the school she would be applying to and was determined to go there. She studied hard, but she was still good at some things, and some things she wasn't. Her mother tried to help her, but Evie refused any help. In the spring, Evie asked her mother about her father and why he didn't talk to them. She didn't answer, just waved her hand. The girl realized that her mother knew something and decided to find her phone number or something else to contact her father. And indeed, she found his phone number, called. Vincent was very happy because all these years, until they lived together, he called Larry almost every month, asking to get his daughter on the phone, but she didn't do it. No one knew why, whether out of jealousy or principle, but now that Evie had the digits of her father's number in her hand, she went to the phone and dialed his number. "Hello, Dad." "Hi," she said when she heard the phone answered. "Evie, is that you?" he asked her. "Yes, I am." She answered him, and she was very glad that now she was talking to a man whom she had once loved very much. She wanted to meet him very much, but it turned out to be impossible, because her father was in another city. That's it, he told her about it. Dad, this is the city I'm going to go to, she told him. Come on, is it true? He asked her. Of course I would deceive you. Then, when I arrive, I'll meet you. And I'll tell you everything, the girl told him. Okay, then I'll wait for you. When are you going to come, in June or later? He asked her. I think that in June we will have graduation, and when we pass all the exams, only then I can come to you, the girl told him. All right, I'll meet you, but be sure to let me know when and on what train you'll be leaving, he asked her. Of course, I'll let you know. Evie was so glad she had contacted her father, and now she thought things must be changing for her. The girl began to study a little better, because she was afraid that suddenly it would happen and she wouldn't be able to pass the exams, which meant that she would stay for the fall, and she could forget about admission. Now in her diary began to appear 4s and even 5s, but it was too early to rejoice. It was necessary to study until the end of the year, and then to look and think about what would happen next. And so, the exams were chosen. She was preparing for them, studying tickets and everything else. There were only a few days left until graduation. Evie was sure that she had passed everything. Now she just had to wait for the results. And when it was announced that she had passed everything, she couldn't help but rejoice. She didn't want to get ready for graduation, because Evie didn't like anyone in her class. The friends she'd been hanging out with recently were no longer friends. All she could think about now was getting her diploma and going to school. When the coveted paper was in her hands, she ordered tickets and only had to tell her mother that she was leaving, and everything else was unimportant. Evie realized that if she left now and lived there with her father, she would be better off than she was here. Mom, I've already booked my tickets and I'll be enrolling in a few days, Evie told her, and she stood there smiling as if she had won the lottery. Why didn't you tell me? Larry glared at her angrily. She'd kept her daughter from her father for so long that she could just tell him she was going to him. Mom, but you have your own life here. You're looking for a companion, so keep looking for him. And I'll be calmer there with Dad, the girl said. With Daddy? Larry questioned her then, shocked that her daughter had forgotten everything so easily. Yeah, with my dad. He lives in the same city where I am going to enroll. He promised he would meet me, and now that I'm coming, I think he and I will have a good relationship, the daughter told her mother, realizing that she was now pissing her off. Don't you think, the woman asked her, but didn't finish. What don't I think? Evie looked at her and smiled cheekily. That he'd leave you like he'd left us, Larry asked. She was angry with Vincent, so she wasn't having fun right now. Mom, he didn't leave us. You told him you wanted a divorce, and he agreed to let you go and file for divorce. You think if I was 8 or 9 years old? I don't remember that. Stood there and looked at her daughter. Okay, if you want, go. I will not keep you, but it will be bad. Call me again. Come running to me, the woman told her, and that was the end of their conversation. Evie waited for her mother to leave the house. She dialed her father's number and, when he answered, told him which train she would be taking, on which day, and where she would be arriving. Evie, I'm so glad we're going to meet. You have no idea, Vincent told her. Dad, I'm looking forward to this meeting too, she told him with confidence. And now the girl is already on the train. She is going on the route where she intended to go, and she knows that her own father is meeting her at the station. The girl on the way was reading different magazines, looking at pictures. She was not very interested in the ride, so when it got dark, she made up her bed and decided to get some sleep. Already in the morning, she felt that someone was pushing her. She saw that it was the conductor, who told her it was time to get off. From home, when she had called, and then when she had talked to her father, she hadn't felt this way. There was a calmness. But now she was getting the jitters. What she'd say to him, what they'd talk about. It had been so long since they'd seen each other that she had no idea what she would say. Evie thought at first that she wouldn't recognize the man who had left them years ago. But when she stepped onto the platform, looked around, saw him and smiled, that she was able to recognize Vincent immediately. He, too, saw the girl looking at him. She looked a lot like her mother, so he went straight to her. Hi, Daddy, she said to him. Hello, my dear, he hugged her, took her suitcase, and led her to the car. Wow. You turned around, she glared at him. Yes, you see, I came here, met a man, and he told me that he could help me find a job. And now, as you can see, he kept his promise, my father said. Yes, I see you're doing well, the girl mumbled. So now we'll go to my place, then we'll talk. And when you go to enroll further, we'll solve the issues in a different way. Evie stared at the man. She remembered what her father had been like. And now he was about the same, but different. Talked differently, businesslike, and everything else about him had changed too. She understood that a great deal of time had passed, but how a person could change almost completely in such a time, she could not realize. They arrived at the apartment. It was a spacious one-bedroom apartment, furnished with nice furniture, a TV, some kind of systems. Everything here was for living. The kitchen had a range. Everything was beautiful. Wow, you've turned around. Is it yours or do you rent? Evie asked about the apartment. Of course it's mine, said Vincent. Cool, the girl showed the class. I don't know whether your mother told you or not, but if I set a goal for myself, I will definitely achieve it. He put some papers on the table, sat down, and looked at his daughter. She walked over, sat down opposite him, and looked at him too. So, tell me, how have you been living all these years? Why didn't you want to talk to me? He asked her. I didn't even know you called, Evie said. She was hurt that her mother was doing this to her. She didn't want her daughter to talk to her father and do it behind her back. I see, I thought so for some reason, Vincent said, and then stood up, put the kettle on, and opened the fridge. What do you do for a living? His daughter asked him. I'm working at the court now. I think I'll be in charge there soon, he smiled. I see, she shook her head, flattered that her father held such a high-ranking position, but that wasn't the point of the conversation. After her father and Evie drank tea and had a snack, they began to talk about the girl's further enrollment. When are you going to go to college? Her father asked her. Daddy, can I go to school tomorrow instead of today? Because the road is so exhausting that I just want to sleep, she said. Yes, of course, what questions? There's still the whole summer ahead. He was not against it. After that, the girl went to her room, took apart her DVD. Her father gave her a pillow, a blanket, and she just went to sleep. Turns out her body was so tired that Evie slept practically all day. She only woke up when her father came home in the evening. She was glad that now no one was telling her anything, and she was doing whatever she wanted to do on her own. Vincent looked at his daughter, and he couldn't believe that now they were together again. He was willing to do anything for her. If Larry wouldn't let her go out with him before, he had full authority over this girl now. Evie, come to dinner, he called her into the kitchen. The girl came in. She was still sleepy, but she sat down at the table and began to eat what her father had prepared. This is delicious, she said as she tasted one bite. Yes, I tried to do that for you. He pointed with his eyes at the delivery boxes that lay under the sink. Oh, I see how you made it, she laughed, because she wouldn't have guessed it herself. The father and daughter had an easy relationship, so the next day when Evie went to enroll, she applied. She waited until the day of the exams, took them all, and a few weeks later she found out that she was on the admission list. Wow, even for free, her father looked at her. Well, what did you want? I may not behave the way you want me to, but I have enough here. She tapped her finger on her head. I see, so where do you want to live? With me or apart, he asked her. Well, of course I would like an apartment, at least a one-room apartment. Then everything will be as it should be, said the girl. Okay then, in a few weeks I'll get you an apartment, and you can live there, Vincent told her. Evie didn't mind that at all. She was even a little glad that her father was making such a concession for her. And when the apartment was found, my father called the landlord. He did everything he could. Vincent paid a year's rent in advance, so he wouldn't have to run around every month and pay. Evie was staying with him now, in the apartment his father had rented, and they were doing some minor cosmetic repairs. Are you sure you can do this alone? Her father asked her. Of course I'm sure. Why would I spoil your life? You're still young and handsome. You'll find yourself a woman, and you'll live together, she told him. Okay, did not argue with her father, because he was afraid of losing his favorite girl again, as it had happened once before. And after Evie moved out, he often came to visit her. She went to visit him. Their communication was like that of very good friends. Evie started studying. At first it was like she even liked it. At first she didn't go out anywhere. She didn't know anyone. But after she met her friends at school, she began to call them all home. One day after New Year's Eve, Vincent got a call from the school. "Hello, your daughter wasn't at school today," he was told, and he couldn't let it pass his ears. "Yeah, okay, I'll take care of it," Vincent answered quickly. He was about to hang up. Wait, not only hasn't she been today, but all of the previous week, the handler told him. You could hear that her voice wasn't as kind as it usually was. Wow, that's a separate dwelling. The man marveled at the time. He dialed Evie's number. She didn't answer for a long time, but when she did, he started to tell her off. "And what's that going on?" he asked her. "Dad, what are you talking about?" She didn't understand. "I just got a call from the school saying you've been skipping classes all last week," he mumbled to her, trying to make his voice rougher. "Listen, who are you listening to? There's nothing to do there. I've prepared everything, I got a credit. And that's it. Let's say I took a sick leave," his daughter asked him. "No sick days. Either you move in with me or you act like a decent girl," he told her. "That's it. I hear you dropped the call to Evie." After that, he got calls from neighbors, teachers from the institution, but there was nothing he could do. Evie was behaving the way she liked. Different personalities were now showing up at the apartment. She tried to attend school because her father had set a condition, either study in an apartment or no study and nothing else. So Evie woke up in the morning, even through force, washed up, changed her clothes, and went to study. It was not difficult to study. It was just lazy to get up and go there early in the morning. One day, some company came to her house. There was one guy she didn't know. She didn't know the others. She didn't want to let them in, but when they exchanged a few words, everything went well. After that, Evie started hanging out with Murphy, who was in this company. At first he went home every night, but one day he just stayed overnight. "Aren't you going home at all?" Evie asked him. It was the summer session, so she knew she had to prepare. "Why, do you feel sorry for the bed?" He smiled back. "No, I'm sorry, but you can't just do that. You have to go home sometime anyway," she told him. No pity, then, and don't talk about it, he moved over to her and hugged her. The girl had gone down the crooked path again with the guys from the unfamiliar company she had started using, and now it was just like it had been back then at school. "Tell me, what does your father do for a living that he can afford such a thing?" Murphy asked the girl one day. "I don't know. Something to do in court," she replied, because she really didn't get involved in her father's business. "I see," the young man answered her then, and they never returned to the subject again. When a young man wanted to earn money, his friends offered him an easy option. He refused at first, but then agreed. He had to take some small packets from them and sell them to others. He did it wherever he could. He went to school, high school, college, institutes, everywhere. When he thought of punishment, he immediately thought of his girlfriend's father and believed that if something happened, she would ask for it and he would get him off. But it couldn't go on like that for long. So Evie put Murphy at the table one night. She set the table. They were going to have dinner, and the girl started telling Murphy that he was doing a bad thing by doing this. Because he wasn't really making money, he was just poisoning young people. Murphy didn't contradict her. He realized what he was doing, but he didn't want to give it up because the money was really not bad and they could live on it. For a while, Evie didn't know how to influence Murphy, so she decided to talk to her father about it. Yes, it was risky, but there was nothing left to do, because if he was arrested, he wouldn't keep quiet, and he would tell what she knew about her, and didn't say anything to anyone. "Dad," hi, she called to her parent. Of course, the girl didn't know where to start the conversation. "Oh, daughter, hi, how are you?" Vincent said. She didn't call that often, so the man now wanted to keep her on the phone longer. "I need to meet you and talk to you," she told him. "Okay." "I don't mind. Where and when?" he asked her. "Let's meet at the cafe near my house," Evie mumbled. She didn't feel like going anywhere. Okay, Vincent answered he didn't mind sitting with his daughter for an hour or two, and it didn't matter what kind of conversation she was having. When the daughter and father met, she began to tell him what Murphy was doing. Her father shook his head, he understood, rubbed his napkin in his hands, and sighed. "Dad, why are you sighing? Give me some advice," his daughter asked him, because she had no one else to ask. "And what can I advise you? It's a legal case. And now that you've told me about it, I realize that after the promotion that's coming, I'll probably be the judge," he told her. "What am I supposed to do? He's a good guy. But this case is ruining everything," Evie almost cried. "Of course I'll meet your Murphy, but don't expect anything good to come of it," the father said very sternly, not how he envisioned his meeting with his daughter. The girl looked at him, and now she too thought that she had told her father everything for nothing. She got up from the table and went to the exit. "We're done talking." Vincent threw his napkin on the table, finished his coffee, and rose from his seat. It had been a few days. Evie had already passed her summer session. Everyone was on vacation now. Her father called her, told her that Murphy had an appointment today, and she was happy, but she didn't know what that would mean. "Murphy, hello." Vincent saw the young man enter the cafe. It was the same cafe where he and Evie had met. "Hello," he approached the table and crumpled, not knowing what to do for a long time. "Tell me, what's going on in your life?" the man asked him. "And what happens in it?" "Nothing special. We live," shrugged the young man. "It's understandable that you live. How do you live? Good, bad, or okay?" Vincent looked down on Murphy. "Just like all the other young people live," he mumbled to him. The guy was generally uncomfortable sitting here talking about all this. "Well, tell me how all the other people live," Vincent wondered. "I do something, get money, and then..." "Well, I think you know what they do." Then Murphy stood there looking at him. "Of course I know what they then do." "And how do they make that money?" Vincent asked, because he was interested in hearing it from someone else's mouth, not his own head. The young man realized that he was about to be asked questions again. "It's what you do for a living." Murphy realized what Vincent was implying. "So you can't make any more money than that?" Vincent tried to get the young man to come clean. "What did she say to you?" Stood looking at him, Murphy waiting for the man to tell him something. "She didn't tell me anything." Vincent sighed, realizing that this guy wasn't as simple as he wanted to make it seem, and now he needed to get him to talk more, which he wasn't going to do. "Okay, I hear you," Murphy told him, and he wanted to go, but Vincent wouldn't let him. He wanted to slow him down at all costs. "Wait," he shouted at him. "What else?" Murphy turned and looked at him the way only enemies are looked at. "Understand me, I am not your enemy. Even if I tell you something now, it is only for your own good. Do you want to end up in a damp room somewhere, behind bars, with who knows what happening to you?" Vincent asked him, because he knew what they did to people like that. "No, I don't," Murphy answered him. And it was true, for he didn't do much of anything. "So get a grip on your head." The young man listened to him, said nothing in response, just turned around and walked towards the exit. He had other plans now. He was angry at the girl, why she had told all this. And to whom? Her father. How could she tell that man about him? After all, he could report him to someone. But nothing. He would talk to her, and then Evie would understand. Now Murphy needed to think of a plan that didn't involve him as the main character, but as a secondary character. He came home and didn't answer his phone for a couple of weeks, and then, as if nothing had happened, he went back to Evie's house. "Hi," he said to her as if he had just gone out for bread 5 minutes ago. "Hey, where have you been so long?" She looked at him and couldn't understand what had happened. "Nowhere. It was business. I had to prepare for everything," he answered her, while he stood and watched her reaction. "What have you been preparing for? You don't work anywhere. You don't study, you don't do anything." She was amused. "Evie, what if we had a party here?" he asked her, because he wanted to have some fun. "Of course I don't mind." She wondered why he was asking about it now, because he'd never mentioned it before. "We'll have a party, call some friends, and then..." "I don't know." He fell silent and smiled. They walked to the kitchen. Evie had just made lunch. Murphy sat looking at her, thinking about what kind of plan to make, although he already had one, but a very cruel one. Of course, Evie suspected nothing. She cooked quietly, put it on his plate, then put the bread and everything else in front of him. She was ready for any conversation now. "So Friday we'll invite some friends over and rock out, right?" Murphy looked at her, waiting for approval. "Of course we will," the girl smiled. She was so glad he was back. She could take any offer now. And since his mood was cheerful, she thought, his father hadn't said anything bad to him, and they had just talked. Now Murphy didn't know how to make sure Evie didn't guess anything. On Friday, as planned, they had invited a lot of guests, some of whom the girl had just seen for the first time. Evie's college acquaintances and Murphy's friends were here. Many of them Evie knew, but still not all of them. The girl was cutting up some appetizers. Murphy was making alcohol. He liked different cocktails, so they had bought everything they needed for that. In the evening, they turned the music up loud, danced, sang songs with the singers coming from the speakers. Everything was fun and great. Evie could see that Murphy had stopped doing something bad. It made her feel happier. It had been so many days, and she hadn't even once noticed him with anything. That couldn't help but make her glad either. And now, with some more friends staying over at night, Evie felt very dizzy. She went and lay down, unsuspecting. The next day everyone was gone, but there were still some left. Evie wanted to clean up, but Murphy offered her another cocktail. "Come on, we'll clean up tomorrow. I'll help you," he waved his hand at her. "Okay, we'll clean up," she said, and took the cocktail from the boy's hands. But because the music was loud for the second day in a row, the neighbors must have called his father. Not a couple hours later, Vincent was outside the apartment. He knocked on the door, stood and waited. "Who's there?" Evie came to the door. She didn't know when she'd started asking. "Open up, it's your father," he said sternly, because he couldn't stand it anymore. Evie opened the door, and of course everything shook inside her. She didn't know what to think. She wasn't in the right state of mind anymore. Her father picked up some friends who were still here. He just threw them out of the apartment. After that, shoveling the piles, he went into the kitchen and sat down on a chair. "Daddy, what are you doing here? Who told you?" Her daughter looked at him with big eyes. "Evie, what did you and I agree on?" He looked sternly at his daughter. "Dad, it's the weekend. We can't relax, especially since Murphy and I made up a couple days ago." She looked at the young man. "That's right, with Murphy," he told her, then shifted his gaze to the young man. What the boy looked at the man. "And you, have you drawn conclusions for yourself?" he asked him, because he couldn't stand liars. "Yes," the man only replied. "So that in 15 minutes there's no one in this apartment, but you," the father shifted his gaze to his daughter, and you could tell he wasn't kidding. Evie realized that Daddy was no joke. She walked Murphy to the door, dressed and left. "And now you took a mop in your teeth and cleaned up everything here," said her father strictly. "Do not think that if I give you money and rent an apartment, I will always be so kind." Vincent was clearly angry with her, but there was nothing he could do. Evie promised him that everything would be done by morning, and he could even come and check it out. Vincent promised that he would definitely come. After that, he left, and Evie went into the room, sitting down on the DVJ. She couldn't. She was dizzy and drowsy, and she didn't know what to do now, because she was so excited because the place was such a mess, and she had to clean it up. But she didn't know how to do it in this state. After everything was done, she collapsed on the bed with no energy. She just didn't have the urge to even lift an arm or a leg. Then the girl closed her eyes. She decided to sleep for a while, but she didn't manage to do that, because not even a couple of hours passed when the door began to be banged on. "Who else is there?" She got out of bed, walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and there was Murphy, with numerous other friends. "Hi," the jolly fellow waved at her. "What do you want here?" She opened the door, looked at Murphy. "We're here to keep the party going," Murphy told her, as if nothing had happened. "I don't need anyone here right now, so go ahead and come back Monday morning," she said, and wanted to close the door. "If we're here, we'll stay here," he said. After that, the people who had come to see her entered the apartment and went into the kitchen. Murphy started mixing them some cocktails again. Everyone was drinking, having fun. There was music again. Evie was on a roll again. She didn't know what was happening to her, but she had to do something. Why didn't she recognize you at all? Murphy asked his friends. And she's never even seen us, they laughed. Her hands were dropping, her head too. The girl went over and told Max about it. After that, the young man took her to the bedroom. He put her on the bed, he himself lay down next to her. Murphy, don't, she whispered. Not really in the mood for lovemaking right now. Relax, he mouthed to her, because he didn't want her to say or do anything right now. Murphy began to remove her dress. Evie moved, but very sluggishly. She was pushing Murphy away, but she wasn't putting much effort into it. So the guy made quick work of her. She felt really good. She rolled her eyes, but she didn't think much of it, realizing that the man she loved was with her now, so nothing would happen to her. After that, he brought her another cocktail. She drank it, and now her head was in a state of confusion. Everything was spinning. She was looking at the ceiling, and she didn't know if she was in the room or somewhere else. And then Murphy took her in his arms and carried her into the big room. There were a lot of Larrys there, all of them guys. Evie realized she wasn't in good shape, but she couldn't do anything about it. No arms, no legs, nothing moved. Murphy laid her down on the DVJ. Someone was saying something. Evie didn't understand anything at all. She just lay there, unable to move. "What are you looking at me for? Get on with it," Murphy said to one of his friends, and it was a whirlwind. Somebody picking Evie up, letting her back down. They were doing all sorts of things to her. And then she felt like she was lying on the floor. Her head still wouldn't go back into place. It was so bad she couldn't do anything about it. "Go check her out," Murphy said to one of the men present. Evie was lying on the floor, her whole body aching, like she'd been kicked or something. She tried to do something, but couldn't. She felt like she was no longer alive at all. Her eyes wouldn't open. She groaned. Someone bent over her. At that moment, Evie opened her eyes and was immediately hit in the face. "What are you doing?" Murphy asked him. She looked at me, he turned back to him, and Evie was done, gone into the darkness. She didn't understand anything, just lay on the floor and didn't move. Checked to see if she even has a pulse. One asked the other. They bent over the girl and felt for a pulse, but it was as if there was none. Everyone was scared, so they decided to just run away from the apartment. But Murphy knew if they just ran away, it would be bad for them. "Okay guys, let's get the rug and wrap her in it," he told them, because he didn't see any other way out, only this way. Quickly, several pairs of men's hands grabbed the rug, rolled Evie into it. After that, they carried her outside. "Where are we taking him?" The man looked at Murphy. "Let's go to the neighbor's yard, throw it in the trash, and that's it. Just walk away," he said. That's what everyone did. After they did, and they were a safe distance from the dump, Murphy told everyone that he'd put drugs in Evie's cocktail, and not a few. What if they notice? The others were afraid, because they were here too. Well, they'll notice and notice she was like that, maybe she did something somewhere. My father personally kicked me out of that apartment, and he knew I wouldn't come while he was there, he laughed, because he thought he had fooled everyone. "Well, we're here," the other young man told him. So what, they came, and then they went. Murphy seemed indifferent to what they had done. After that, they went to some pub, sat down, and started drinking. The guys just didn't think about anything, neither about Evie, nor about the rug, nor about the dump where they had left the rug. But it was time to go home, so the friends split up. They told Murphy before they left that if anyone asked them anything, they had nothing to do with it. It was all him. He agreed, for he didn't care what anyone thought. He was really sure that nobody would be looking for Evie except her father, and he didn't care about that now. And who would find her on that dump? A car would come in the morning, they would take out the garbage, and there, on the big dump, nobody would need her. He came home quietly. It was very late, he went to bed and forgot about what had happened today. But in the morning he got up, his head hurt a lot. He did not think about anything, only about where to get a new dose to take it. Evie woke up, she couldn't do anything. Her head was still spinning. She realized she was either bound or something else. Her head hurt so bad she just couldn't do anything. There was also that nasty smell in the darkness. Where she was, she didn't realize. She started moaning because she didn't have the strength to scream anymore. Her whole body ached so much that she just couldn't do anything about it. Then she felt someone canting her. as if she had been pulled from somewhere and carried. "Wait, man, I think there's someone in the carpet," she heard a voice from outside. After that, the girl realized that she was in the carpet. "Who will be there?" "Look at the normal carpet. We'll go and make a bed there. We'll be fine," said the other one to him. They walked on, then shook Evie's head even more. "Okay, quiet, everybody. Listen," said one of the men. Everyone quieted down and listened, but there were no sounds. "What are we supposed to hear?" someone in the crowd asked. "Quiet, I can't make out what we need to hear. Just let's all be quiet together, and maybe we'll hear something," the same rattling voice said. Everyone was silent and listened, but nothing was heard. Then they decided to put the rug on the ground and think. "What, do you think this carpet would look good in the basement?" Someone asked about it, and the others began to clamor. Evie didn't understand anything at all. She felt so bad, she thought she was dying. "In the cellar, everything that you don't bring will look good," answered the other, because he knew what was going on down there. It was good that they were allowed into the house, because the janitor was kind, otherwise they would have had to wander around. But the men rested and got ready to go on. The three of them picked up the rug, threw it on their shoulders, and were ready to go when there was another groan. "There, you heard," said the same senile voice, even having to repeat it more than once. "We heard, but what is it?" The one who kept asking didn't understand. "How do I know what it is?" "I think it's from the carpet," he said quietly. "You're hallucinating already," VJ the other told him. "What hallucinations?" Listen, Evie heard him say, and when he said, "Listen," she moaned again. She couldn't speak, so she had to moan. This rug was squeezing her so hard on all sides that she just couldn't do anything else. The girl moaned some more, and then some more. It wasn't until the rug was placed on the ground again that she realized it was about to be unrolled. She had to coordinate the movement so that she wouldn't get dizzy or worse. Help Evie spoke softly so that the others would realize that there was a person here. They began to unroll the carpet altogether. There were 4 of them, and they were very careful. The carpet was very large, but they managed. Now that they had unrolled it completely, they saw that it was a woman or a girl. It was hard to make out. "Look at her," said one of the men who had just told VJ he was glitching. "We need to get her to the hospital right away," said another. They began to tell the few passers-by that the girl was ill and needed to go to the hospital, but they all shied away from them. Then, it was decided to carry her to the basement with the rug. Somehow they lifted her up and carried her. She didn't look very big, but she weighed a lot. When they reached the cellar, they were all tired. But there was not much left, and then the men took her by the arms and legs and carried her down into the cellar, laid her on the same rug where she had been lying, and began to examine her. "Look at her. She's all torn up," said the same VJ who was examining the girl's body. "And what to do? You can't do without a hospital. Anyway, the doctors have to examine her," said someone else. They did not know what to do, how to be. Then VJ stood up. He raised his index finger up, as if he had thought of something. He left the basement and went to the janitor's office. But he wanted her to call an ambulance. But when he got to her, it turned out she wasn't home. It was unknown where to look for her. Then the homeless people decided that they could deal with the problem themselves. They started looking for something to sanitize their wounds. They had only 3 bottles of alcohol left, which they had left for tonight. They had to sacrifice them. "Here, take these," one of the men handed them the caskets. Nothing was too small for them now. They took some dirty rags and began to shake them off. Then to clean Evie's wounds. She was moaning, delirious. Someone took her temperature. Just a hand touching her forehead. It was learned that she probably had one, but we still had to wait until morning. In the morning, VJ ran to the janitor again. He finally got her to call an ambulance. The woman did as he told her. She was also frightened, but did nothing. And now they waited together for the ambulance. When the paramedics arrived, they examined those who had rescued the girl, smirked, but did not refuse them, because they had taken the Hippocratic oath to help anyone. The paramedics saw that the girl looked normal, picked her up, placed her on a stretcher, carried them into the ambulance. The lights came on and the girl was taken to the hospital. She was no longer delirious, but seemed to be in the other world. The doctors examined the body of the young girl once again in the car, realized that the girl had been beaten and also raped, but none of them would do anything now. It was necessary to put her in a state of stability first. When they arrived at the hospital, Evie was placed in one of the rooms. The doctors immediately rushed there, and when they started to find out everything, it turned out to be the daughter of the local judge. "Oh girl, who did this to you?" someone said above her. Evie heard some words, but she couldn't make anything out. She was put under anesthesia so that she could not feel anything. Something had to be stitched, something had to be repaired. The doctors were fighting for her life, and also for her blood, for she was unknown where, unknown with whom. Immediately the suspicion fell on those very homeless, that they most likely found a drunken girl somewhere, and abused her, and then called an ambulance. And now they were afraid and hiding in their basement. But no one cared about that yet. Now it was necessary to find my father and tell him everything, and then let him take any measures against these bastards. Evie lay under the drips. She couldn't regain consciousness for a long time. She kept babbling and saying something. When her father arrived and sat down beside her bed, he just put his face in his palms and cried bitterly. "My daughter, who did this to you? You only tell me the name. I will immediately this man into several pieces." He sat beside the bed and told her. But Evie couldn't tell him anything yet, because she was in no condition to do so. Vincent went out into the corridor, met the doctor, and asked him how his daughter was doing. He told him everything. The father felt incredibly sorry for his daughter, imagining at once what those bandits might have done to her, and how they had dealt with her. But now, while nothing could be done, because he did not know for sure, these bums, not these bums. But just in case, he sent the guys who had arrested these scoundrels, and now they were all on their way to the jail. "Tell me, where did you meet this girl?" The investigator, who had been appointed in charge of the case, asked them. "We didn't meet her anywhere. We just found a rug in a garbage dump," they said, hiding nothing. "So what? The rug's in the dumpster. And there was a girl in it?" He didn't understand. Yes, it was like that they told him. "Well, what happened next? Why didn't you call an ambulance?" The law asked them. "Yes, we called her, or rather we wanted to call her. But no matter who we approached, they shied away from us, as if we were contagious," said one of the four. "Okay, and then how did you get called in?" The investigator was just curious. "In the morning I went to the janitor, and she called an ambulance," said VJ, who went to her both morning and evening. "Okay, what was with the girl when you found her?" The interrogation continued. "She was all torn up, and we didn't even spare our last cup and rubbed all her wounds with alcohol to disinfect them," said another man. "So I understand you," said the man in shoulder straps. He looked at his comrade, and then began to write down something. The homeless people sat there, looking at each other, not knowing what to do now, but they had to tell everything. "This is the first time I've seen such decent bums," the uniformed man told them. "Well, take a good look and remember," VJ laughed. He was just shocked that today really hadn't worked out that way. The girl they had found was unconscious, and no one knew what would happen to her next. The whole time they were sitting in the ward, the doctors were fighting for Evie's life. It was when she regained consciousness that everyone quickly ran up to her with papers. They had to take statements and ask who the scoundrels were that had done such a thing. Evie spoke a little, but she told them everything honestly, about Murphy and his friends, but she had very little strength and she fell back into unconsciousness. "Get away from her," Vincent said. He'd been calling his ex-wife Larry for the past hour, but she wouldn't pick up the phone. Vincent couldn't understand how a mother who'd lived with this girl for so long could be so disinterested in her daughter, but now he was seeing it for what it was, and there was nothing he could do differently. Vincent had taken some time off work, taking care of the girl because it was important to him that she survive. And now he knew for sure that she would, because she'd come to several times, giving some kind of testimony, talking. Dad couldn't understand how this could have happened at all. Murphy, who had promised him that he would be decent, that he would do everything and not do anything, had arranged this. Or maybe he'd set it all up because of him. Vincent stopped and stared at one point. Then he started thinking about it. Well, that wasn't the point, so Vincent pushed those thoughts aside and walked over to his daughter again. "Evie, my love, I realize now how wrong I was. Perhaps when you came from your mother, you needed support, warmth and care, and do you want a separate apartment, of course, well on, please. He was talking to himself because the girl was unconscious again. She was lying on the bed and he was sitting beside her. Vincent knew she was beside him and could hear him. As he sat by his daughter's bed, he promised himself and her that he would get his revenge and he wouldn't let it go. He didn't know if Evie had hurt him or not, but he knew that once she recovered, no lawyer would save that scum from punishment. Vincent knew exactly what he would do, what he would say, and how he would punish the man who had done this to his daughter. Now we had to wait for Evie to come to her senses so she could testify. I didn't really want to try innocent people. And so, a few weeks passed, the girl finally came to her senses. She just lay in the hospital. Vincent asked her every day about things, about the situation, about everything. Evie told him, but often averted her eyes, ashamed of her father, that it was mostly her own fault. If she hadn't gotten involved with Murphy, if she hadn't let him into the apartment, none of this would have happened. Her father would reassure his daughter he would tell her it wasn't her fault, to not blame herself. But Evie lay there, she was crying and laughing. Vincent thought at first that she had something wrong with her head. "Honey, calm down and know that your father is the best in the world," he kissed her. Now, after everything that had happened to the girl, he just couldn't leave it like this, without a solution. After taking his daughter home, he had already decided exactly what he was going to do, and how to punish the scumbags who had done all this to his little girl. The first thing he did was find Murphy, who was the instigator of it all. When Murphy saw Vincent, he wondered why he'd found him, since he hadn't done anything. But Vincent didn't want to hear it, because he knew exactly who had started it and why it had been done. "Well, weren't you waiting for me?" Vincent asked him. "No, why?" The boy didn't understand. Murphy was very surprised. But when Vincent began to tell him about Evie, he was even more surprised because the boy thought the girl had rotted in a dumpster long ago, and her body had never been found. "What, I can tell from your eyes you're surprised?" Vincent asked him. "No, I don't know anything at all," Murphy answered him. "I can see in your eyes how you don't know anything." The man was very upset that even though Murphy was playing the game, he was doing it very poorly. Vincent pressed charges against Murphy. Of course, it wasn't real now, because the investigators would be coming. But he was afraid Murphy would see Evie, and then he'd be off somewhere else. So it had to be done here and now. "So you come with me and turn in your accomplice," as he twisted his hands behind him and led him behind him so he couldn't do anything. "What are you doing?" "It's not my fault." "You hear me? It's not my fault," Murphy screamed. "It's up to the police to decide whether you're guilty or not." Vincent pushed him ahead of him. Murphy didn't resist. He walked ahead of the man, stumbling over every bump, but still moving forward. It wasn't very pleasant, but there was nothing left to do. Vincent rubbed his hands together because he'd caught one of the bastards. Now he had to find the others, but how could he do that if this thing wouldn't talk? But he knew the police wouldn't let anything go to waste, and Murphy would definitely start talking. Murphy was taken to the police station. Vincent didn't know what else to do with him. He left him there and sternly ordered the policemen not to let him go. They just shrugged their shoulders. Of course they wouldn't let him go, but how to get information out of him about the others who were with him? "It's okay. Shake it a little. It'll tell you everything," Vincent told them. The interrogations began, and they didn't end until the evening. Vincent knew he couldn't get much out of Murphy, but he also knew that the guy knew a lot. Not just about information, but about Larry. And right now, he could make the cops' ears pop. So Vincent decided to go blackmail. He goes to the police station. "You know, and I know what this guy's been up to," I said deliberately, so the guy could hear it all. Then turned to Murphy, looking at him. He sat there, staring unblinking. "Go ahead," he shrugged. "Why are you looking at me like that? I tell you. The drug you were distributing was found in my daughter's blood. Not that you didn't add it to her," Vincent asked him. "Why are you doing this? I promised you I wouldn't do it anymore," Murphy said, sitting back in his chair, his hands clasped behind his back, almost crying. "You also promised me that you would cherish and nurture my daughter, my little girl," Vincent told him back, almost crying himself. "All right, and I'll tell you," Murphy said, and he looked at everyone sitting here, silent at first, but then he got ready to speak. The guy realized that if Vincent opened his mouth now, he'd just get added time on top of everything else. Yeah, we went to Evie's party, and I was really pissed that she'd talked to her father, that she'd told him the whole story about me, and I wanted to get back at her somehow. So when she'd had a few drinks, one of them was filled with, he paused, and then he said what he'd put in it. There you are. Vincent banged his fist on the table. He couldn't listen to this scoundrel's confessions. That's all. And then it was just a matter of time. She blacked out, then she passed out. We thought she was dead when we wrapped her in the carpet, Murphy admitted. I see. Names, surnames, patronymics the girl's father demanded of him. Murphy told everything. He didn't hide anything. And within 3 days everyone was brought here to the police station. Vincent stared at these men, and Evie wouldn't even stand next to them, let alone lie down. He looked at one, the other, the third, with contempt, realizing what scum they were and what they'd done. But he was powerless now. If he started doing something of his own, he wouldn't be forgiven, but his time would come. The cops were interrogating. There was a lot to ask, a lot to do. The men were locked up in a holding cell. They gave testimony. Most of it was true. And who would have thought that the father worked as chief magistrate? Because Evie had said her dad worked in a court somewhere. No big deal. And it turned out to be. Murphy couldn't understand how it could happen that this girl's father was a judge in this town. But it was all done now, so it was too late to make a fist. Evie had finally come to her senses. She lived with her father, became very modest, did not go anywhere all the time, saying that she did not like anything. Everything did not matter. Her father forced her to go out to do something, but she didn't want to do anything at all. Daughter, will you come with me to the trial? Do you want to see how these freaks are executed? He asked her. Dad, please don't make me do more than I can do, she asked him. Yes, of course, darling, whatever you say, he told her. And that's all. After that, the men were convicted, all given different sentences because everyone was guilty. Some did one thing, some did another, but they were all guilty of not providing first aid to a dying man. No one argued with that, so they just stood in the cage with their heads down. Murphy looked up for a moment, looking at Evie, and she was looking at him at the same time. Dad, how could he do that? Evie asked her father later. I can't tell you anything. He's just a scoundrel, a man who doesn't appreciate the feelings of others, and he doesn't care at all what the people he talks to think, which is also proved by the fact that he sold these illegal substances to children who then died. Not all of them, of course, but probably many, he said. Yes, and the truth always triumphs, Evie agreed with him. Yes, it had to end, and it did. And I think it was the logical end to the whole story. The father hugged his daughter. Dad, if it hadn't been for you, imagine what they would have done to me. They were sitting at home when Vincent's phone rang. He looked at the display and Larry's name came up. Ah, come to think of it, he said, and showed his daughter's cell phone. Don't take it, she asked, because like her father, she didn't want to socialize with this woman. Okay, whatever you say. Vincent dropped the call. After that, the daughter and her father started living together. No more rented apartments, nothing that could affect the girl's life. Dad, don't we ever thank those homeless people who helped me? Evie asked one day, because she remembered what they had said and done, and she felt sorry for them. Look, I've thought about it before too, but I didn't know what to do, he told her. Let me find them and bring them to you, she mumbled. Okay, look for me. Bring me. I'm waiting for you, Vincent said, and smiled at his daughter. Evie stepped outside. She looked around. She needed to find the 4 men who had rescued her, but she had no idea where to find them. She was in some kind of basement, but she didn't know which one either. Then she began to remember what they said and thought that they could not carry her far, so she went to the yards that were near her house. She found a janitor in one of the yards and asked her if she had called an ambulance. Excuse me, can I ask you a question? She approached the woman. Of course, the woman looked at her. Do you happen to know 4 homeless people? Evie asked the woman. I used to know them, but they haven't lived here for a long time. She pointed to the basement. What was very surprising was that this house was practically next door to her house, meaning that those who had killed her, or thought they had killed her, had just carried her out in a palace a few meters away from her own house. Evie was flabbergasted. She was both amused and wanted to cry, but she did neither of those things, just asked where to find the 4 men who had helped her survive. "Oh baby, these are such good people, they have always helped me in everything, and I, while no one knew, helped them too," the woman told her. "So you know where to find them?" Evie asked. "Now I don't know where they are," but she pointed to the basement and said they were sometimes there in the evening. "Thank you so much," Evie shook her hand. "Oh girl, weren't you saved by those 4? I called an ambulance then." "It was you," the woman looked at her point blank. "Yes, that was me, and now I want to find these men and do something good for them," the girl admitted to her. "And you leave me your cell phone number. As soon as they get here, I'll call you right away," the woman said. "That's a great idea." Evie didn't think of that right away. She wrote her numbers in the notebook the woman carried with her at all times, said her goodbyes, and left. When the girl came home, she told her father everything. He was surprised how his daughter, unconscious, delirious, but still remembered something. He praised her, and they sat down to dinner. "Daddy, you know what I realized, even if you are a homeless man, and you live somewhere in the basement, there can still be something human in you." The daughter looked at the man. Yes, he nodded his head and said nothing more. "Why are you so pensive?" Evie asked him, because she wondered why her father was usually so talkative, but tonight he was silent all evening. "Your mother called," he told her in just a few words. "And what, did you answer her?" she asked. "Yeah, and you know what she told me?" Vincent continued to stare at the girl. Of course not, she didn't understand why she had to pull this information out of her father now. That she'd been sick all this time, she was sick. And she was in the hospital, my father said, at which point he was digging into his plate with his fork. "And you believed her?" Evie raised her big eyes to him. "I don't know," he shrugged. They didn't talk about anything else that evening. Evie went to her room, lay down on her bed, covered her head with a blanket, and began to remember how things were in their family. Here was a young and happy mom who was always telling her something, taking her in her arms. And here's Dad, he's just as young and smiling all the time. What happened? Why did everything happen like this? Why did she become like this herself? The girl cried. Now she wanted so much to call her mom and tell her everything, but she never decided to do it. The girl decided that if she called, she would do it not today, but tomorrow. After that, she closed her eyes and tried to sleep. During the night, she dreamed of different things, mom and dad, some friends, something else. She tossed around the bed, couldn't calm down for a long time, but eventually she fell asleep, and she doesn't know what happened next. In the morning, when Evie woke up, she saw the missed call light on her phone. The number was unfamiliar, and so she immediately thought of the janitor Thea, with whom she had recently spoken. What if those men had gone to their basement again? She saw them, and decided to dial Evie. She called back the unfamiliar number, and a woman's voice answered. "Hello," she heard. "Hello, you called me," Evie said, listening to see who it could be. "Hello, this is Murphy's mother," the woman mumbled. "What? Why are you calling me?" Evie didn't understand. "I just wanted to apologize for my son. He's always been mean to the girls, and what they did to you is out of line." Evie could hear the woman crying. "You're not upset. Everything's fine. At least for me," she told her, and she didn't feel like talking anymore. Evie had recovered in her studies. Now she had to practically retake the same course she had left behind and hadn't studied for a long time. It had been about 8 months or so, and her phone rang again. Evie hesitated to pick it up for a long time, because the number was unfamiliar again, but she couldn't miss the call from Thea. "Hello," the girl said. "Evie, hi, it's me, Thea, remember me? I'm the janitor from the house where you were looking for the bums," she said. "Yes, of course, hello, I've been waiting for your call for so long, and you haven't called. I thought maybe you lost your notebook or something else happened," she said quickly, because she was afraid that Thea would just hang up. "So yesterday I heard that VJ and his friends were in the basement again. At first I thought I was imagining it, but then when I went downstairs I saw that they were really there. I wanted to tell them about you, that you've recovered, you've been discharged from the hospital, and now you're looking for them to thank you." Thea spoke as fast as Evie did. She didn't know what she was afraid of, but it didn't matter to Evie now. She listened to Thea, wondering how to get this information to her father and where to find the homeless people. She asked Thea if she had talked to them. "No, I didn't get a chance to talk because I was afraid they'd get scared and leave," the woman told her. "Well, do you know when they might still be there?" the girl asked. "Evie, you know I've followed them, and I know where they're dwelling now," Thea admitted to the girl. "So where do they live now?" Evie wondered. They had gone quite far away, but in order not to be terrorized and not to be found, moved into the basement 2 blocks away from this house. "Where they found you," said the woman. "Wow, can you show me?" Evie was so happy to have found her saviors that she didn't think about anything else. Thea, of course, agreed to show her where her saviors now resided, and they agreed to meet. "You know, I can't do it now, but in 2 days I'll come to you and we'll go together to where these people are," Evie said, and hung up the phone. After talking to the woman, Evie went to the kitchen where her father was drinking coffee. He was going to work. "How are you doing?" he asked her. "I'm doing great. How are you doing?" She kissed her father on the cheek. "I'm doing fine too," he told her and looked at her and smiled, seeing that his daughter was happy. "Oh, Daddy, I just got a call from that janitor from the yard where those bums found me, and she told me that she saw them again. Not only that, when they went out this morning, she followed them, and now, when I have free time, I will go to them, and we will find them," she told her father. "That's great news. I don't know how we're going to thank them, but I don't think they're going to charge us. What else do they want?" Ivy smiled. She didn't say anything, and now she was thinking only about how she could finish all her business and go to Tamara Egorovna's meeting. Everything was fine. The term paper was written. Exams were passed. And now the girl is going to the very yard where she was found in the carpet. She arrived, but the janitor was nowhere to be found. Of course, it was sad, but she was not going to go anywhere. Sat down on a bench and waited for her. She had enough time, so she could sit. Thea didn't show up until 2.5 hours later. When she first saw Evie from afar, she immediately gasped and remembered that they had agreed to meet, but what day they hadn't agreed on. And now Thea wanted to talk to the girl. "Hello, my dear." She came up to her. "Thea, where did you go?" Evie asked her. "Yeah, where I went. It's not there anymore," she told her, waved it off and laughed. "Well, it's understandable that you're not there anymore," Evie laughed too. Thea took a seat next to the girl and began to tell her how she had heard that men were coming to this basement again. "Tell me, Thea, how can we thank them? Will they take money from us or something else?" The girl wondered. "Oh, Evie, I'm going to tell you all about it now," the woman told her. She sat next to the girl like that, folded her hands in her lap, and began to broadcast. Intrigued, Evie looked at her. "You realize that if they are homeless, they have nothing. One of them told me that he had lost his memory. The second one, when he got a job, they took away his passport. He ran away, and without a passport, they don't hire him anywhere. Well, of course, you can make one, but you have to go to so much trouble. So they all live without a passport, without memory," the janitor told her. "Okay, we'll make passports for them, but that's a small fraction of what we can do," the girl said. "Yeah, passports are a small part of it. I don't know. Offer them money or something," Thea thought. She wasn't a rich woman herself, but what she was doing was fine with her. "So you promised me you'd show me where the 4 of them live now?" Evie asked her. "Yes, of course, we'll go with you now. I'll just get changed." She went into the entrance, went into her den, stayed there for a short while, and went back out to Evie. Wow. She saw that Thea was wearing some kind of coat, even though it was old, but it suited her face. She was also wearing boots that she must have found in a dumpster, and she was carrying a purse. Evie checked out the outfit, and they walked down the sidewalk a couple of blocks to the house where Thea thought the men who had once helped Evie now lived. And they were indeed in that house, just as Thea had told them. As soon as they saw Evie, they immediately went somewhere. "Wait," Evie shouted to them. "What do you want?" They stood there like stumbling blocks. "You're a sight for sore eyes," she told them as she approached. "We don't know anything. We didn't do anything. We're not guilty of anything," they began to say in order. "Yes, I know you didn't do anything. I'm looking for you to thank you," the girl told them. "We don't need anything. We have everything," said one of them suddenly. "I know you don't need anything, but can I make you some papers?" she asked. Papers, they looked at each other. "You?" "Yes," she nodded. "Of course you can. Why can you do it?" The men were immediately animated. "First, let's get acquainted. My name is Evie, but I think you already know that. What's yours?" She looked at them. She wanted to know which one of them was VJ. "I'm Freddy." The man she wanted to recognize immediately introduced himself. "Okay, who are you?" She looked at the next one. "And I'm Aiden," the man said. He was very embarrassed. "Okay, Aiden. Who are you?" She looked at the next one. "I'm Max," he said and chuckled, probably not knowing why he did it. "What's so funny?" Evie didn't understand she was serious in front of them, and they were making fun of her. "He doesn't remember his name or where he's from or who he is," VJ told her then. "All right, well, what about you?" She looked at the last one. "And me, Pete," he told her. "I see you're all such intellectuals. How did you get here?" she said. "You know, things happen in life. We're homeless right now, and we don't even know how we met. We just started living together, and we just kind of grew attached to each other," VJ told her. "Promise me that you will not go anywhere from here." "I'll go home now, tell my father, and then he'll find you and do what he can," the girl told them. "Promise?" Thea looked at them. "We promise," they said, and looked at each other again. "Okay, I believe them. Let's just make a deal. You don't go anywhere. I tell everything to my father. He makes your papers. And only after that you and I may or may not part. Or we may or may not stay friends," Evie told them. "Good," they replied. After that, she actually went home, waited until the evening when her father came home from work, and told him everything right away. Her father was very flattered by the work his daughter had done. He praised her, thanked her, and now there was only one thing to do: meet with them, and do everything they asked. Vincent was a man of his word, and if he wanted to help these people, he meant to do it. Now he was going to find out if he could restore the documents to the very homeless men who had saved his daughter from certain death. It turned out that it wasn't that hard to do. And if they were smarter, they could do it themselves, and long ago would have been with the documents. As soon as the man found out everything, he immediately went to the address that his daughter had given him. "Hello, fellow homeless," he greeted the four men who were sitting near the entrance on a bench while no one was there. "Greetings. And who are you?" they asked the man. "I'm the same father you've already seen," he winked at them. "Oh, that's right," Judge said VJ, and smiled with a toothless mouth. "Tell me, how long have you been in this position?" he asked them. Whoever VJ spoke for everyone. "I see. So you're the smartest?" Vincent asked him. "It works out that way," he nodded. "So are we going to restore your documents, your memory, your family ties?" The man in the beige coat looked at them. "Yeah," Max nodded at him, looking at Vincent like he was some kind of celestial. "That's it. I need accurate data, and I'll do everything in the shortest possible time." He took out a notebook and started writing something down. Everyone except Max dictated everything to him. "And he doesn't remember much. How he came, where he went. We took him into the company out of pity," Pyotr Fedorovich said. "I'm clear. Wait here, or will you come with me? And I'll get you a hostel, and you can stay there for a while?" Vincent asked. "If I may," VJ said quietly. He could already see that no harm would come to them from these Larrys. "Of course you can." Vincent looked around at the men. Yes, they weren't very clean, or rather quite dirty, but he sighed and opened the car door. As soon as everyone got in there, the cabin immediately smelled like something other than the Christmas tree that had been hanging there. Vincent opened the windows, held his breath as long as he could, and they drove off. Not half an hour later, they were all there. Vincent stared at the back seat, thinking he was going straight to the car wash. "Thank you." The men thanked him tirelessly as they received their room keys. Yes, they had been put in one, but the girl at the front desk didn't want to do that either. "Do you realize we'll have to burn this hostel down?" she said to Vincent, but when he offered to pay quadruple, according to the number of guests, she didn't argue with him. "That's it. I'm off. Expect me in the next few days," he told the men, and walked out of there. He went straight to work. There was a lot to settle, and that matter with the bums. Vincent found out that VJ's relatives had been looking for him for a long time, and so had Pete's, and it wasn't clear what was wrong with the two of them. "I'll take care of it," he said, and looked at the assistant prosecutor who was helping him with all the questions. She was a charming young woman who drove Vincent crazy. And indeed, the man figured it all out. Before making the documents, he contacted the relatives of all the men they were looking for, gave their names, and sent a photo. A few days later, they were here at his place. And when he arranged a meeting, the relatives couldn't be happy. As promised, Vincent made all the documents they needed. "I was wondering, you didn't lose your memory. Why didn't you come home?" he asked VJ. "And how could I have come empty-handed? And then I thought that my wife had forgotten me." He hugged the woman. "You guys," Vincent shook his head. Now it was just a matter of finding Aiden's relatives, but that was the hardest thing to do. He couldn't remember his last name, but the photo he'd been given had helped his relatives find him. Max, on the other hand, was the hardest. Not only did he not remember his last name, but his name was fictitious. "What am I supposed to do with you?" Vincent looked at him. "I don't know." After what happened to him, his face was also a bit deformed, so no one recognized him from the picture either. "Vincent, can I ask you a question?" Somehow they met again, and now Thea was with them. "Of course, why do you ask?" He looked at her. Actually, she was the one who made sure the ambulance came. "Is there somewhere to put Max and me alone?" She was embarrassed. "Of course. And you won't drink?" Vincent wagged his finger. No, they made big eyes. "So where do you live now?" He wanted to go somewhere else, but he stopped. "I have, but nobody knows about it. They allocated me a utility room in the entrance." "That's where we live," Thea said. "It's clear to me. If I buy you a room in a communal apartment, is that enough?" Vincent asked them. Of course not. She wanted to hug Vincent, but didn't dare. Everyone had their papers in their rooms now. Evie wept when she heard what her father had done. At that moment, her phone rang. Evie looked at the screen. It was her mom, and she couldn't help but answer it at a time like this. "Hello," the girl said. "Daughter, hi, I'm so sorry." Larry sobbed into the phone. "Mommy, I love you so much. Can I come visit you on vacation?" Evie asked her, and looked at her father. Of course, Mom was still crying. Evie pressed the reset button. She realized now what she had done in her life. She wanted so badly to make things right, and she had plenty of time to do it.